All right, I've pressed the button. It'll take just a second for it to connect. You guys can see the opening graphic, okay, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, it is up, so we'll just stay quiet for a minute and then you can start the meeting, Joe, at 11:30.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I want us, hopefully, I won't start until we see Dan and Andrew.
Sounds good. All right, so yeah, just so you know, we are live on YouTube right now.
Okay.
Hi everyone. I'll turn on my video. I just want you to know that I may have to toggle back on and off. Southern California Edison is about to turn off our power, so I've got my hotspot on, but I just don't know if I'll lose connection. If I do, I'll come back on as quickly as I can.
Thank you. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, hey, Andrew.
Hi, how's it going?
It's 11:30. We're just missing Mr. Jeffries. Okay, Dan's trying to get in on the old link, so he needs to adjust. Good morning, everybody out there watching on YouTube. We're just waiting for a few minutes to get everybody here and get set up, so bear with us. Jamie, you did send that link to all of us, right?
Yeah, I just gotten it.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
There's Dan.
Hey guys, I'm here now. I did just now get the second link from Jamie.
Very good. Okay, so it's 11:32. So let's officially open the meeting up. And I'm going to read our normal script. Welcome everybody out there watching on YouTube. And thank you for everybody on the meeting here from our side for the special meeting. Pursuant to other meetings, we also will still read the same Brown Act executive order. On March 17th, 2020, our governor issued executive order N2920. Under this new order, a district can now comply with public attendance and comment requirements of the Brown Act by holding a meeting via teleconferencing and allowing members of the public to observe and comment either telephonically or otherwise electronically. Public comments are being accepted online and will be read by district staff after board discussion of the presented items. Again, my name is Joe Radabaugh, board president, and we're getting ready to move into our Pledge of Allegiance. Brent, could you lead us, please?
Yes. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Brent. All right, well, we're going to move right into, again, there's no non-agendized comments today, right? It's a special meeting, so all agendized comments will be folded into the agenda items as we go through. And with that, we'll get right started to our first read item. Number 4, approval of distance learning schedules for LCUSD elementary schools and 712 for the 2021 school year. Wendy, take it away.
Thanks, everybody. It's nice to see you all. The original intent of our meeting today was for the governing board to not only review the schedules that were recommended by the secondary and the elementary reopening review committees, so the original intent was to determine if we were going to be to open virtually or open with live on-campus instruction. As the agenda item notes, on Friday, that decision was for all intents and purposes made by the governor. Newsom required that districts and counties which are on the monitoring list for COVID-19, we required those to open virtually. He also issued guidance for schools and school-based programs that outlined the 5 main points. School reopenings will be based on local county health data. And in our county, Los Angeles County, we would need to be off the state monitoring list for 14 consecutive days. And then there are other requirements that are listed in regard to how we would have to meet those requirements in order to reopen on campus. So essentially the purpose of today's meeting is for the governing board to engage in 2 things. One is to review the proposed schedules that have been put forward by the elementary and secondary reopening committees. I know that there'll be extensive public comment on those schedules, but essentially what the board's required to do is to, per board policy, vote on or take action to approve the start and the end times. So, you know, and I think in this case, because the schedules are different than what our typical daily schedule, bell schedules are, would be to endorse those times or to give recommendations to staff to, you know, look at any particular issues or areas of concern. But then also we signed on Friday a memo of understanding with LCTA. That's also included with this item for governing board review. It's important to make it public, to vet the terms of the MOU with the community. District staff has the authority to enter into that MOU. We are still in negotiations with both of our associations with regard to the effects of working conditions. Both CTA, CSCA, and the district staff are very willing and understand that all of this is fluid and dynamic. And so potentially if there was direction from the board for staff to, you know, look at any terms with regard to the distance learning and distance instruction requirements, staff would take that and act accordingly. So I would just sort of turn it over to you, Joe, if you wanted to guide. Well, I can walk us through the schedules and then walk us through the reopening, the distance learning or distance instruction requirements. And then after we look at those in detail, we could open it up to board discussion.
Yes, great. Let's go ahead and do that. Some of us are familiar with these, but yeah, once you lay those out and then we'll react with discussion. Thanks.
So I appreciate board members serving on both the elementary and the secondary review committees. So we're going to start with the MOU on distance learning requirements. It was important for us to establish these simply because when we pivoted in March and went to distance learning, distance instruction environment, everybody was doing the absolute best that they could, but we didn't have clear, coherent guidelines. And so these are the requirements for distance learning. We'll start with the elementary requirements. And the first bullet is that teachers will communicate their weekly goals. That would include learning objectives, some assignments, and additional information. Those would be posted by 8 a.m. each Monday. They'd be posted on a district approved platform that was consistent and well articulated with families. So parents could find where the learning goals were, and it would sort of kick off the week every week in a very consistent fashion. For distance, this would be for all distance learning, whether a student was signed up for the virtual academy or just engaged in distance learning until we were able to pivot and go back to campus. But the requirements state that teachers will provide daily live synchronous instruction per cohort, whether it's the AM or PM cohort, and that live instruction will be accessed during the time students would be present in the classrooms had they been in school, either on an AM or PM schedule. Next bullet indicates the contractual day. The contractual day for teachers is from 8 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. The AM and PM schedules provide for 155 minutes of daily instruction. And that it requires that at least one 30-minute session of daily live instruction take place for each of the subject areas: language arts, math, and then either social science or science. The TK through 6th grade teachers shall not be required to teach more than 310 instructional minutes per day, and that includes whole group and small group instruction. So what you have there is for the core classes, which are being provided in the AM or PM, teachers would be with the AM and PM cohorts for a minimum of 30 minutes of live daily instruction, one for English language arts, one for math, and then for either social studies or science, depending on the teacher's daily schedule. Teachers will communicate the methods by which they can be reached during their established contractual day to provide additional student support. Asynchronous enrichment. So those are all the special courses, which would be art, music, PE, all of the things that the student would participate in outside of their regular instruction day, outside of their core curricula that the teacher was delivering. And that would happen either in the AM or the PM asynchronously. Teachers will take attendance and monitor student participation daily. After 2 days of non-participation, teachers will contact parents to re-engage the student in his or her learning. After the initial contact, administrators support the classroom teacher in making these contacts. We will use Google Classroom or a district-approved platform to post assignments and monitor student engagement. Administrators and tech support will be added as co-teachers, this and all working to support the teachers in delivering distance instruction. Teachers will make lesson resources accessible via Google Classroom or ClassLink, and the elementary teachers will provide 2 forms of evidence of learning progress, and they'll issue feedback on assignments which cover the essential standards and impact student progress in the courses. Teachers have agreed to use multiple modalities of presenting information to meet the needs of different learners. Teachers have agreed to respond to all emails and phone calls from students and parents by the end of the next workday to support home to school connection. And then teachers will adhere to the existing homework policies to support additional learning progress. So those are the elementary requirements. The distance learning requirements for the secondary teachers are similar. They start off with communicating the weekly goals, again, the learning objectives, some assignments, and information by 8 a.m. each Monday. This will be done using Google Classroom, and those assignments will be posted to monitor student engagement. Teachers will establish a method through Google Classroom to monitor participation and engagement on a daily basis. After 2 days, this matches the elementary requirement. After 2 days of non-participation, teachers will notify the student's counselor at the secondary level to contact parents and to re-engage the students in his or her learning. After the initial contact, administrators will support the classroom teachers and counselors in making those re-engagement contacts. The bargaining unit contractual day is from 7:45 to 3:17 at the secondary level. Teachers are not required to teach more than 286 instructional minutes, and that matches the collective bargaining agreement. Teachers are required to follow the daily bell schedule, greeting students live at the beginning of each period to initiate the classroom period. Attendance will be taken during each period. The requirements for live daily instruction for each period are a minimum of 20 minutes for daily demand schedule. So those are schedules where the over the course of the bell schedule, all 6 periods meet, and for a minimum of 40 minutes for the 80-minute block schedule that's being proposed. Teachers will engage students following the bell schedule, and they will participate through direct instruction, guided practice. Teachers will check for understanding, and they will set the expectations for daily independent practice and homework assignments. And then live instruction shall take place in a period by period synchronous fashion. Teachers will hold daily office hours, and those will be communicated to students and parents. And then we've built a schedule, the virtual schedule for the secondary, to provide for small group learning experiences. And those learning experiences we had envisioned taking place on campus to provide students access to campus, provide them with a home school connection, build school culture. However, with the governor's announcement on the 17th, it looks as if we'll need to delay that. And so that after school experience will be delivered synchronously via a digital platform, but we've still allowed for those daily small group experiences to happen 4 days per week on the daily demand schedule from 1:50 to 3:15, and on the daily demand schedule from 2:05 to 3:15, and on the block schedule from 1:50 to 3:15. And so we will be working with the site administration at the high school to establish the details for how those connections are built. But we really want to make sure that even in the virtual environment, we're reaching out to students, we're providing social emotional opportunities, we're connecting on content or on other issues. At a minimum, teachers will hold office hours at the secondary level according to the bell schedule to provide students who need help. They'll communicate methods by which teachers and counselors can be reached during their office hours. Teachers have agreed to provide feedback on assignments that cover the essential standards and impact students' performance in class. That feedback will include what the students are doing well and where there's areas for improvement. At minimum, 1 grade per week will be issued at the secondary level. Teachers will use multiple modalities, and we were specific there, whether it's a Zoom breakout room, recorded content, small group activities, project-based learning, live streaming, game-based learning, use of digital apps, the Socratic seminar, others I'm sure that teachers will develop, but those are a list of possibilities. But using these multiple modalities to present information to meet the needs of different types of learners. Teachers will respond to all emails and phone calls from students and parents within 2 working days to support the home to school connection. And teachers will adhere to the existing homework policy to support students in their learning progress. So that in a nutshell are the the instruction requirements that were agreed to last week, trying to provide structure to our virtual learning experience. And those were agreed to in the MOU. I think it helps to contextualize all of those distance instruction requirements by looking at the school days. So Jamie, if you could post the elementary reopening schedule, that would help. So if you take a look at the elementary schedule, the interest with the review committee in recommending this is that it provides us with a virtual schedule that also transitions seamlessly to an on-campus loading at 50% capacity when our campuses are able to reopen. Just to note, for transparency, our TK and kindergarten teachers forwarded yesterday an alternate schedule that they would like us to look at. We didn't have time over the last 19 hours to do so. They're proposing an alternate schedule that decreases a little bit of the screen time for our youngest learners. And so more to come on that. But currently what the TK through 6th grade schedule allows is AM and PM virtual instruction, which would transition to AM and PM live on-campus instruction with ratios at TKK anywhere from about 12 to 15 to 1, based on loading capacity. In first, second, and third grade, ratios of 11 to 1. In fourth, fifth, and sixth, we would have ratios of no more than 15 to 1. Students would be on campus from virtual or on campus if you were in the AM from 8:10 to 11:05 with a staggered scheduled recess. The recess would be adhered to virtually and it would be adhered to on campus. If we go to on-campus learning, then those recesses would be in zones to maintain social distancing. The lunch period is from 11:05 to 12:05, designed virtually for teachers to engage in some nutrition, also includes their prep period, but it's designed this way for when we return to campus so that there's a complete hour for the custodial staff to go into all the classrooms and do that deep cleaning during the school day to protect the learning environment with regard to COVID and the deep cleaning schedule. Our PM students would arrive virtually at anywhere from 11:55 to 12:05 with instruction beginning at 12:05, running until 3 p.m. This schedule has students engaging every single day in virtual instruction, as well as it transitions to every single day attendance when we're able to return to campus in a 50% capacity with social distancing and all of the other requirements put forth by the governor. Again, there's a staggered recess for our PMers, and we liked the consistency of a daily schedule. And we also liked that while we're virtual, the AM students would access asynchronous opportunities through the specials like art, music, PE, offerings synchronously and asynchronously in GATE and drama. But the afternoons for the AM students are available for all of that so that the learning day is a full school day. And then those opportunities are available to our PM students in the morning. So then again, we're providing for a full school day, but just with asynchronous and synchronous options depending on the student schedule. Okay. Moving to the high school. That reopening schedule, ironically, very much mirrors the schedule that we had, that we have in our sort of normal life. If you harken back to days prior to March, it's a combination. We call it a modified block schedule. There's daily demand, meaning periods 0 period through 6 period on 3 days a week, on a Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. On a daily demand schedule, the periods are 40 minutes in length. We have added 3 minutes to second period for announcements in order to maintain the school culture, school connectedness. So the principal or student body would be doing daily announcements in second period. All of the passing periods, except for second period, are 10 minutes in length. That gives students a time for a stretch break, restroom break in the virtual world, and then also possibly, a quick nutrition break. Lunch is a half hour on the daily demand schedule from 11:35 to 12:05. The school day concludes on the daily demand at 1:35 with a 30-minute office hour or prep. When we designed the schedule prior to the governor's announcement that those office hours were providing for student travel time, because the goal with this schedule was to get students in a very limited capacity in small groups back on campus to maintain that campus connection, to further their work in small groups on the curriculum, or to further social emotional learning experiences. Now that we have our campus facilities closed until we're off the watch list in the county, the office hours provide teacher time to connect with students and families, potentially engage in some prep, but then the 2:05 to 3:15, 2 30-minute sessions of social emotional connection are provided for virtually. On the block schedule, which runs on Wednesdays and Thursdays, Wednesday would be, I believe, periods 1, 3, 5, and Thursday 2, 4, 6. The periods are 80 minutes in length. As you remember, with the distance learning requirements, 40 of those are for live guided instruction. Again, a 30-minute lunch on the block days, and office hours or teacher prep from 1:15 to 1:50, and 85 minutes to 40 minutes after school day opportunities for small group instruction and small group enrichment. I know a lot of talking, but it provides all the details for the recommended schedule and the MOU, the memo of understanding on required distance instruction.
You have a friend in the background, Wendy?
Yeah, I gotta close my door real quick. Sorry.
I know you're on vacation this week. I want everybody to know that Wendy's doing this despite her trying to squeeze in some vacation time. So hopefully you're at a place where maybe it sounds like some exotic animals. I think we want to get started. I mean, we don't have a scriptured way to walk through it, but Wendy, are you okay with us? I kind of wanted to open up a couple thoughts and then let everybody else chime in, maybe talk about the MOU and then get into the schedules. Does that sound okay?
Please.
But first off, okay, great. I just wanted to thank district staff and the associations for making such meaningful progress on the MOU in really a very, very short period of time. I mean, I don't think everybody realizes there's a lot of back and forth that happens in an MOU and negotiations. Things get dropped, things get added, folks have different opinions, and you end up in a place that I'm quite surprised we ended up in so fast. So thanks to both parties for getting to that point. I think it's a strong effort. I was looking for such things, which I saw included as additional structure to the day for the kids, live learning, synchronous opportunities, engagement protocols, meaning making sure our kids are staying active in the process, feedback loops, office hours, small groups. A lot of those things I was looking for ended up in the MOU. I know there's more, and maybe Wendy, you can speak to that. Even though we've done this MOU and it creates the guardrails, there's still an opportunity, right? Like the TK, for us to even go a little bit deeper and add on some things later on. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, we have a 20-page template MOU for reopening that we're currently looking at bargaining with LCTA. And we've made some initial progress, but there's an extensive amount of work that needs to happen there. One of the reasons that we worked really diligently last week was to create the memo of understanding that we did on distance instructional requirements, simply because coming to the board, we didn't want there to be a disconnect between district administration requirements that had been presented at the review committee meetings, had also been presented at the board meetings. But we wanted to make sure that those terms were agreed to with LCTA so that we weren't presenting something that wouldn't come to fruition. So we met and we sort of scaled back on a few things, clarified some other things, and what we have presented here, although it can be reviewed and potentially modified, both parties are operating in good faith, but it currently, as it's presented, represents an agreed upon a set of requirements for distance instruction.
Well, then I'll open it up. I know it's kind of hard to talk about the MOU without referencing the schedules and back and forth, and the schedules are slightly different, elementary versus 7 through 12. But I would just open up, being part of the committee, it was moving pretty fast. I was the secondary committee, and where we ended up with block was very interesting for me. I think it's a routine everybody knows, and we were concerned about overloading kids on Zoom all day long. So now we minimize. There's a lot of benefits to that. We have some committee members that are going to be able to join us and weigh in a little bit. But I'll turn it over to the group. Maybe we start just going through the MOU a little bit. Any observations, maybe what's missing, clarifications, because there's some things that aren't in there but might still be possible to do. And you and I talked briefly offline, Wendy, that there could be some other things we do. Just because it's not an MOU, it doesn't mean it can't be done. And I'll turn it over to the rest of the group for entertaining discussion, and then we can look at public comments as well.
So what are you referencing?
The MOU.
I know, but you said you talked offline, some other things that can be done.
Oh, well, there is things like, you know, if it doesn't call out, can teachers teach from within their classrooms or not? Maybe some want to and some don't. And so that isn't specifically called out in the MOU, but it doesn't, maybe we could still entertain things like that. That's just an example.
Joe, can I start with a very basic question? And that is, we've asked the parents to, by July 26th, respond to whether or not they want to go online or in person. And this has all changed significantly since Wendy's email came out asking the parents to make a choice. And I believe as it stands now, we've asked parents to, for elementary, opt into online for the entire year, and for secondary to opt in for the first quarter or semester. And knowing that we're starting out online, does that change the need for parents to take any action? Does it push back the July 26th date, or is it still necessary so you can form all the classes to know at such time that we go back in person which class is which?
Yeah, we touched on that, Wendy, right, this morning. So maybe you can lay out your expectations there.
So we've asked both TK through 6 to commit if they want to join the virtual academy, and that would be a commitment for a year. That would essentially allow for a family to know that throughout the entire year, even if we hit stage 3 and you know, that we are able to welcome our students back on campus at 50% capacity or fully loaded as we left school, you know, in March of last year on a full day schedule, those families would still have the protection to be able to engage in the virtual academy. It's important that people recognize that we have to create class placements. Those class placements have to be with teachers who are willing to provide the virtual instruction throughout the whole year. We have to make sure that all of the placements follow the agreed upon ratios, so that classes aren't too big or too small, but they follow the anywhere from 11 to 15 to 1 ratios. And so we are still looking for families at the TK through 6 to make those commitments. We were hoping that the distance instruction requirements allow families to have a stronger sense of the type of distance instruction that would take place, and the quality. That, you know, I think we did a very, very good job last year, but there weren't guidelines or requirements for how that instruction would be delivered. The intent behind these guidelines or these requirements is to, you know, shore up and provide some more uniformity, some expectations for how the district instruction is offered. And so we are still looking to, you know, we'll take direction from the board, but because of all of the work that has to be done in order to prepare the classes and a lot of the detailed work at the sites for, you know, students to be able to know who their teacher is, and for those teachers to know who their students are, and then also for us to work with teachers who are able and interested in providing a year-long distance instruction. So that's all work that needs to be done. So Dan, to your point, we would still hope to have families make that commitment or pre-register for that by this Sunday. Jamie and I are working on a sort of a marketing flyer so that people can, in a snapshot, understand sort of what the distance learning program will be like. It would also include some narrative text from me reminding families that they need to register, and trying to put this MOU into a succinct bullet point fashion so families know what they would be committing to. It's a little bit now that since we're opening up virtually, everybody will be getting, you know, sort of this virtual distance instruction experience. But I would hope, and I think we're all hopeful, to have students back on campus as soon as we can. And so it would just be some students would maintain the virtual experience because they were in the virtual academy in kindergarten and TK through 6. Other students would, when we're able to, you know, come back, do so in a 50% AM PM fashion and have their same teacher transition back to the school site with them, because we want to make sure that those teacher-student connections are intact and maintained. At the high school level, we still need to create our 50% schedule. The challenges at the high school have to do with, providing distance learning when a student is off cycle. If you go AB, there's half the time when a student is at home. They're on schedule for when they're, if it's every other day or an every other week, they have the experience of being on campus at 50% of the time and at home 50% of the time. In order to make instructional progress, or to make sure we've met the 180 days of instruction, we have to figure out a method by which students are accessing the progress on the curriculum at home. And that's quite demanding for teachers to, we had talked about doing recorded lessons for when a student was off cycle, but just the sheer overwhelming nature of creating recorded lessons and live lessons simultaneously was daunting. And so we pulled that proposal off as a recommendation, and we're going to continue to look at options for live and distance instruction at the 50% capacity. But what we need to do is we're still asking families who want to commit to quarter by quarter the virtual and learning experience to do so that we know sort of what our numbers are looking like, because that will inform what 50% capacity on campus looks like once we know who's interested in coming back when schools reopen and who's not.
Thank you, Wendy. I think it makes sense. I understand it for 7 through 12 because you're only committing for a shorter period of time. I guess my concern is if you're an elementary parent and everyone's hopeful that the vaccines will be in place and monoclonal antibodies will be in place, but so that by sometime in the early part of next calendar year, things will be back to normal. I know that's hopeful thinking, wishful thinking, but if it does come to be, I think there may be parents who are concerned that at that time they would like their kids to be back on campus. If the world returns to normal suddenly, they'd like to be back on campus. How do we account for that?
Well, I think that, part of the challenge is, and maybe we need to sort of not examine it in a full calendar year, but maybe we're talking the first 2 trimesters. That would put us into March before, a family had to look at opting or sort of being able to opt out of the virtual learning experience. But the problem is that with the Virtual Learning Academy, we're setting up an experience with the teacher and with a class. So, 22 to 1 AM and PM, so 11 to 1 at the elementary, 15 to 1 AM and PM, 4th grade through 6th grade. And if you have a situation where you don't have a calendar period by which a family has committed to that, you could have somebody opting in or out, changing the ratios, changing the classroom dynamics, because that teacher in the virtual academy has committed to being out and delivering virtual instruction for the length of whatever we propose. Currently, we're proposing for a full school year. So you're really trying to protect the instructional experience, and I think you need an established time frame by which people are committing to that experience. Now, a year may be too much in this very dynamic environment to commit, but I think then the board would need to sort of say, it's going to be at least, I don't think anybody anticipates that the sort of a December mark being too soon. So maybe it's maybe we're looking at the calendar year. But it's just, I think people need to be aware that if you have people committed to the virtual experience, then that whole cohort, that whole class is committed to it. And as people change their mind, it might not be the whole class changing their mind. And so then you're going to have students needing to join classes where they haven't built the relationship with the teacher, or where the ratio doesn't permit a student to join because it would throw the numbers off. That's the difficulty in sort of minimizing the commitment length.
Can I jump in for a second? I mean, I think that I am very sympathetic to how structurally difficult it is to plan for a year when we know so many things are going to change. And I also totally sympathize with families having to make that decision for any sort of long period of time without knowing what the future is going to bring. It strikes me, and especially as I was reading this MOU, that one of the ways we can help kind of balance the needs of the district to have some stability and some visibility into what our year is going to look like, with families' needs to have some visibility into what their own future and their own year is going to look like, is by one, providing the MOU that we provided. So I think that's very valuable. That gives parents one part of the equation, which is now it's not as much of a mystery what they are opting into if they opt into virtual learning. But I think the other side of that equation is something that you need from the board. And I think the board needs to do sooner rather than later. I would push even for today, which is to commit to what the benchmark is for reopening. Because that way then parents are on the one hand not guessing what virtual instruction looks like, but they're also on the other hand not guessing what in-person instruction will look like and under what circumstances. Because I certainly heard from parents who said, well, I want to send my kids back to campus, but if you're going to send them back during a surge, I don't want to be part of that. But then when the surge subsides, I don't want to have opted into a year-long. I get that. That makes sense to me. The governor, what he announced on Friday, I think provides for us an opportunity to use as his standard, our standard. We obviously have to use it as our minimum standard, but what I would say is let's go a step further and make clear that we're not going to add additional standards on top of that. That essentially when the district is in a place, when the county is in a place where we're no longer on the watch list for 14 consecutive days, that will be the trigger for reopening. Now, obviously it may not happen the day of the 14th day. I understand there might be some more appropriate sort of like cut point to make that decision. I don't know if that's quarterly or monthly or whatever, but I think that in my mind is the only way to provide the kind of clarity that a parent would need to make a smart decision, short of just giving them all the flexibility in the world to go in and go out. And I think, Wendy, you've adequately explained why that's not really feasible for us to maintain either program. So short of that kind of complete flexibility, complete visibility into what in-person is going to look like, what virtual is going to look like, and with as much of those eyes wide open, asking you to commit for at least the semester, but even potentially for as much as the whole year, I think that strikes the right balance. But again, the missing piece here for parents is they now know what virtual learning is going to look like, but they're not yet being told by this board or by the district what is going to be the moment where we say, yes, we're going back to campus, or at least we're going back to campus for those who are willing to go back to campus.
Yeah, Andrew, that's been bothering me the whole time too, is that what is the triggers, right? In terms of those benchmarks. And that's some of the information I passed along through Senator Portantino, that what I think is missing is we need some help from what those benchmarks are, but we also maybe need some kind of MOU mechanism with our associations also, because we could say one thing and we really have to have that piece worked on together as a collective group so that they feel safe, they feel ready. And maybe our benchmarks are slightly different than what the governor says. Maybe it's related to PPE or certain things we accommodate for the teachers to feel safe. And I think we need to work on that quickly. I don't know how we can pull it off today, but I think it's very, very important to this whole equation is give some certainty when we're going to try to reopen, and the teachers and associations are aligned with us so we can go.
I would just say, I mean, I totally understand how much needs to be worked out underneath the goal post. What are going to be the PPE that needs to. I think the problem is that short of setting the goalpost and short of setting it from the very top, in this case at the board level, there's too much uncertainty. It's too much uncertainty for parents to have to decide by Sunday, am I going to be willing to send my kids back to school if I don't know the criteria under which this board is going to make that a possibility? And I think that there's a lot that needs to be worked out. And I think Wendy and the team are eminently capable, as evidenced by this MOU turning around so quickly, in creating all of the right agreements and all of the right details. But I think from a stewardship perspective, I think the board has to say, this is our goal. Our goal is that when the state, which again, I think they handed us a gift because they have able to shepherd the public health official knowledge of the whole state in a way that this district does not alone have the capacity, and says, when you look at all the factors that we're monitoring, we've decided that you can consider reopening after you've been off this watch list for 14 days. I'm not saying that has to be the benchmark, although I'm happy to acquiesce to that benchmark, but I think we shouldn't undervalue how much mileage our district is going to be able to get, parents, teachers, everyone, if we can actually just set that benchmark, even understanding that it's going to mean there's a lot of work that has to be done beneath the surface to actually effectuate it.
I hear your points, Andrew, and I think those are really valid points. I do want to clarify a couple of things, and maybe Wendy, you can jump in just for clarity. We have set the parameters and communicated with parents very early on that we needed to have, like Dan mentioned, a set date. So they've known for at least parents have known at least 2-3 weeks that they needed to register, et cetera. And then there was a deadline for registering for virtual academy, correct?
Yeah, I think the pre-registration's been live for over a week, about a week and a half.
Okay, and then Andrew's point about having a kind of a trigger and what our benchmark is in reference to when are we going to look at coming back. I wanted to ask about the structure would remain. I mean, I hear what you're saying about having the cohorts stay together and stay collective, whether on virtually or on campus itself. Is that a possibility? And then what does that do in reference to rooms and space if we've split up the groups and the number of children and then the timing, et cetera? So I think, Andrew, if I'm reading correctly, that's what you're talking about, the details that have to be worked out. Is that what I'm hearing from you as well?
Yeah, although I'll caveat that by saying I think those are the details that I believe from a logistical standpoint, I get why the district needs to set down hard deadlines so that those logistics can be worked out and not have to be reworked out every week or every month or every whatever. And so part of my hope is that by setting some clarity and doing that now, that this isn't something that has to be continuously revisited, rethought, reimagined in a way that I think is just not sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable for the district to have to keep reimagining what those facts are going to look like and what the classroom groups are going to look like. But I also don't think it's realistic for parents to have to keep reimagining whether, okay, now is it okay? Now is it okay? Now is it okay? I'm just looking for, is there a way for us to say, despite the fact that there are going to be a lot of details that need to be worked out in order for us to accomplish these goals, can we set what the goals are so that I don't want the community to have to tune into YouTube every 2 weeks to see if they can send their kids back to school. I want them to know, what are we aspiring to? And when we all can see that thing coming into focus, we know that we're sending our kids back to school.
I actually like the community actively engaged. I think it's phenomenal to have this kind of a setup, and maybe
it's a little volatile, right? I mean, I love the passion and engagement, but I think a little clarity might go a long way.
I think the problem, as I see it from that perspective, is that one of the requirements of the governor's goals is to get our case rate at under 100 per 100,000 residents. And right now, the case rate in the county is somewhere up around 400. The case rate in La Cañada itself has been over 100 the last few days. So as a county in total, we're nowhere near there. But I think the problem with setting up a trigger like you're talking about is that would be assuming that the case rate will continue to go down and stay down. My concern is that we might go 14 days with the case rate hovering just under 100, and we make all the plans to come back, and on the 15th day and the 16th day and the 17th day, we're back over 100 again, which then requires us to shut down under the governor's orders. Or we have a number of cases in our schools that also require us to shut down. So I think there's a risk that you would have to take of opening and then closing back down if you do it at a time that we're not certain the case rates are continuing to go down and are staying down. And I don't know how you do that. I think, though, that if you trigger it just by the 14-day, we've passed the benchmark, we're okay to go back, we run the risk that a few days later we may have to pivot back to being virtual.
I think that's what Andrew's asking for, is that whether it's 14 or we come up with something slightly different, let's put it out there, right? So if it's,
right.
Dan, we proposed that maybe we look at it every 6 weeks, or we rolling 4 weeks. And so the 14 days fits inside of that. And so I think all that's mechanicals that we could work out to provide some guidance for families.
I have to say that, and I think those are all really good points that we consider, but we need the stability on all fronts. for children and families, we need to be sure to say that, okay, we're going to go the first trimester or the first semester to make sure. Now that would be, even if there is a 14-day or 2 14-day or 3 14-day periods where the county is met its benchmark, because we're seeing these fluctuations even as recently as just this past 2 days. Some research has come out from countries that have seen surges even though they had things controlled. So I think that that's an important point. The other part is the teachers. If you're planning for online instruction, it's different than when you're doing planning for face-to-face. So can we give some stability there and saying, okay, not just every 14 days or even every 4 weeks, but can we look to say, all right, we've got the first trimester, and within that first trimester, we've got, let's say, 2 or 3 board meetings. Can we check in with each other and see what the planning can be for the future? I think we need to maintain some stability, but to Andrew's point, maybe the trimesters are the marking points that we make adjustments if we need to.
And that's what I was advocating for, is to, instead of just having a trigger, have periodic times that we might execute that trigger. In other words, that we might go back as early as the day after or whatever, so that parents can plan accordingly, knowing that we will be virtual until at least this period of time. And the next decision point is whatever it is, the day after Labor Day, the day after Halloween, the day after Thanksgiving, whatever days we set or milestones we set, so that parents can sort of plan accordingly, that those are the days we might pivot back, rather than having to wait every 14 days to see how the trend is going.
The other thing I just wanted to get clarity on, or just make sure that we're all talking the same thing, is that for families that aren't opting into the virtual learning academy, and I'm talking TK through 6 here, that this information is really important for them, because then they need to know sort of what are the markers by which the district would then reopen classrooms and their students would go from being virtual learners to being, you know, on-campus learners. For the virtual academy, you know, we heard from several families that there weren't going to be conditions in this coming school year whereby they felt really comfortable sort of pivoting, and they wanted that sort of 100% security that their consistency of experience would be virtual. And what we're setting up now is, if you're in the virtual learning academy, we're going to identify teachers who, you know, will deliver that experience, you know, for the entire school year. And what's important there is that you have the classrooms being able to be consistent. You're having the group of students remain stable. You're having the teacher remain stable. And the challenge is that if that becomes fluid, then you're going to be impacting all of the other classrooms and cohorts who are ready for, when these markers are met, to come back on campus. And I think that's the only, you know.
Let me just clarify one thing, is that it's my view, and it's just one view here, but it's my view that we shouldn't necessarily create more flexibility for those that are opting into the virtual learning beyond that which the district feels it can logistically handle. If that's a whole year, fine. If that's a semester, I suppose even better, but I also think I will completely defer to the district's judgment about what is logistically possible in terms of the commitment. I'm saying that because of that commitment we're asking them to make, we just owe them back some clarity about what are going to be the conditions under which we permit in-person instruction, so that when they're weighing those options for themselves and for their own families, they have some sense. Obviously things can change. This is a very volatile situation, but they can sort of put their minds in our, you know, they can put themselves in our shoes and say, okay, I know the benchmarks that the district is going to be looking at are these, and these. Because otherwise it's a little bit like they just have to hope that, you know, without us telling them what are going to be the X, Y, and Z that we're looking for, they have to hope that we see eye to eye on what is considered a safe school environment. Yeah. And without asking them to trust us implicitly on that, I think setting some benchmarks, whether it's completely deferring to the states or saying we'll use the states as a jumping off point, but then we will also consider local factors such as A, B, and C. But without that level of clarity, that's where I start to be uncomfortable asking them to make such a commitment. But if we can provide them that level of clarity, then I think then it is appropriate for us to ask them to make that level of commitment.
Right. And the other thing too is that we've always maintained that the virtual experience, if you enrolled in the virtual learning academy and your idea was 100% virtual learning, that if we got to stage 3, whereby the factors were that it's safe for everybody to come back unless there's a unique extreme condition, then we wouldn't still hold you to being virtual. I mean, our ultimate goal is to get every student on campus and a return to normalcy as soon as possible. So I think that would be also important to articulate to families that if we have a vaccine and it's safe and all the conditions are met, we're not going to say, oh, no, you committed to 100% virtual learning, you're not coming back. I mean, that's counterintuitive to what all of us want as the district to be reopened when things are safe.
So that's at least one benchmark right there, is
Stage 3.
if everything is safe, the families that have committed to virtual learning are able to then, and obviously the details need to be worked out between the teachers and the schedules and rooms and space, et cetera, to accommodate that we transition back into a typical classroom environment and experience at La Cañada.
Well, we may want to have our, if lack of the government, the state providing this or county providing this, our own stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, like we're talking about. Stage 1 being where we are right now. Stage 2 meaning we can load classes at 50% and have some in-person small groups, things like that. And then stage 3 is full back to school. Everybody's welcome. We can have 100% capacity. And maybe we just need to put some time wireframing that together so we understand what we're working with, and we can fold in some of the state mandates along the way, county mandates as well.
Yeah, Joe, a couple of things. I mean, I agree with everything said. I think Andrew brings up some good points. I like Keitzer's idea about maybe going to the trimester so people at least have a gauge, so it's not going to change every 2 weeks. I just wanted to say I really like the MOU. I agree with Joe. I was really impressed. You really moved fast. So kudos to the administration for making that happen. And I had some other questions. Joe, is it okay to move on, or should?
Well, my hope was we'd go back to the MOU. I think we got on a very valuable tangent, but at some point to facilitate the rest of the meeting, we need to get back to probably talking about the MOU and talking about the schedules and making some commitments from the board to ratifying the guardrails around those.
Yeah, Wendy, I have a couple of details about the MOU. So if TK and K, if it's online, like what do they do during recess? How does that work? Do the teachers stay online, or do the parents just take care of that?
No, I mean, recess is as it is. It's a nutrition break. So that is a time. I mean, it's a virtual environment, and so we don't have the paraprofessionals who are able to go out and do recess duty. So it really becomes that time where it's a nutrition break. It's a bathroom break. It's when you're at home, that time then sort of reverts to parent time, just to manage the logistics of the virtual environment.
Okay. And secondly, the live instruction, will it be recorded? So if someone missed class, they can go back and watch it.
Go ahead, thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the logistical points we're working on, because there are some student data privacy concerns, both by parents and teachers. So we just need to have those guidelines in place. So obviously we'd want to record them so they would be accessible, because we know there'll be challenges with parents that might be working and then they need to help their students with learning later in the day. We just have to get the guidelines in place to make sure that's safe.
Okay, so we're just not there on the details. Okay, thanks.
I mean, and one of the things that, like to Jamie's point, that is of concern is that if I'm delivering live synchronous instruction, then that's equivalent to students, coming to campus. I mean, that's as close as you get to, the interactive quality that people were missing in some cases with our learning experience in the spring. So, if a teacher created a Screencastify, it's much more, it's easier. That is a recorded, platform. That is a recorded lesson by very virtue. But if a teacher's Zooming with her kids, it's that live experience in and of itself is a live experience. And so if a student's not able to access that, then, it's like being absent from, so I think that there's ways that we can try to figure out how to maintain privacy and shore things up, because this is new territory. But I also think that we can't do everything. And when you're absent, you miss the live instruction. And when you're absent in the virtual world, to some extent, you might miss the live instruction unless we can think of, other ways to help support that.
Oh, okay.
And I think we're being really deliberate on the types of content, or offering advice to teachers on the type of content that they prepare for the live instruction. I listened to a really good podcast yesterday by a tech integrationist, and her podcast is called The Cult of Pedagogy. And she had a specialist on from New York. And she really talked about, when you're doing live instruction, if it's knowledge-based, maybe that's a pre-recorded piece that you push out to students, but the SEL components and the relationship building, take advantage of the live moments. And so again, if we're being thoughtful about a teacher preparing a lecture that they're going to teach 4 times that day, that might be better prepared as a video, and then the class time is spent talking and discussing. So those are some of the guiding conversations we're having with teachers. And then again, that would make sure things are accessible if kids are absent. But again, those are all the details we're kind of working out right now.
Okay, thanks.
More comments on the MOU. Let's keep talking. We're starting to get some traction there. What's maybe missing, or call outs or clarifications?
I wonder if you could talk about I think it's great in terms of the expectations and the accountability, the sort of standard setting of it all. The piece of it that is not in there, but I imagine you've given some thought to, and I think as a district, it would make a lot of sense for us to lean pretty heavily into, given how much things have changed in the last 6 months, is PD, is just leveraging resources for our teachers, making sure that I know some of it has been done this summer, but I just wonder, even things like, getting creative around, can we bring them back a few days early? Can we do immediate after the first day of school, full day things if they can't come back in the summer? Can we leverage our recent LCHS grads who are probably at home in the district more often than they would normally be, to be like stipended tutors or lead like SEL guidance counselor things? It just seems to me like this is really great for setting the guardrails, I think, as Joe has put it a few times. But then the piece of it that I would next really want to see is all of the resources and support that are going to go into making these shifts, successful.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point. Some of the things that we have offered some payment for summer hours for teacher lesson design and prep. We've also enrolled all of our teachers into a summer session from ISTE, which is, sort of a really good resource for how to prepare and develop, virtual or distance learning, lesson design, things like that. I think that we do have learning loss dollars. And so it's really important for us to work with, the Teachers Association, and work with Ed Services to identify what are the most effective supports that we can put in place to, give teachers PD, to give teachers resources, so all of those things, we have 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks until school starts. Potentially we could have an extra professional development day or 2, but we have to look at sort of what's going to be most effective for teachers. I like your idea of leveraging, resources that we haven't thought about before. Part of this is really demanding work, and I empathize with teachers feeling, very overwhelmed by just all that has to be put into this paradigm shift of just radically different instructional delivery. And so, there are resources that we haven't availed that we could really look towards. It might be, is there a paraprofessional per teacher, although expensive, might be just to have somebody, able to, help you manage the Zoom, or, just really thinking outside the box for how we can support teachers, and doing so quickly so that they know what those resources are going forward.
Wendy, may I add a few things to it? Our technology TOSAs, who are also a good instructional supports for our teaching staff, have been both at elementary and secondary level, have been putting together sessions that are very practical and very customized to LC, as well as we have been working with them to create either teacher expert roundtables or teachers recording themselves to show successful practices. And those are going to be put together kind of like a library of videos that teachers can access at their own time and if it's convenient for them. As well as Deborah and I will be meeting today in the afternoon to go over some of our common areas of PD as to which way we can maximize on that buyback day of providing as many sessions as possible virtually for teachers to opt into, and some sessions that are everybody needs to be part of to be successful in this new experience. New more so because now there are expectations clearly communicated, whereas before there weren't clear expectations and they were just trying to do the best that they could overnight pretty much. But now since we have those, we are going to craft our support to meet those specific needs of expectations that we're asking the teachers to meet in this new time coming. So there will be plenty available as far as PD goes, and also time to work in their PLCs to maximize each other's helps and support so they work smart and not work hard.
And
Great.
I can jump in. Wendy referenced the larger MOU, and that's an area of mutual interest that's already there about some professional development time. And we'll be looking to that going into distance learning. And then along with that, there will be the kind of training time for hygiene and cleanliness when we actually get back on campus too. So those are mutual interests for both the bargaining unit and the district. And I think they're on the horizon there.
Can I also add, in reference, and Anais, you mentioned the PLCs. I think that's a really great place in reference to professional development. There's a couple of things I'm thinking. So we know, and research tells us, and practically speaking, we know professional development extremely important, but we want to make it effective and efficient and really relevant at the moment. And student engagement in a virtual setting, meeting the social emotional needs is really important. The knowledge base of our instructors and our faculty, I think I'm not concerned about necessarily at this point, but I do want to give time. So we're pushing a lot of new information through and asking our teachers to accommodate and meet the demands of and do the virtual, et cetera, which I know that they can do. And the MOU has structured some of those understandings. But I think for me, having gone over a 3-day period from face-to-face instruction myself as a teacher to virtual instruction is really learning the nuances of how to make sure I keep a student engaged. Like I know, Jamie, you mentioned maybe knowledge and content in reference to pedagogy is recorded, whereas the dialogue, discussion, and follow-up has to be live. I also think there are some content areas that have to be live, even the knowledge and the information that's being shared because of some of the questions that come, which then triggers the teacher to be able to take one direction versus another direction. So I think all of those things are areas that we can begin to look at. And as a team, I would ask the administration and the instructional division to really look at how can we make sure we support the teachers who ultimately then will support the students in their learning. Do they have time themselves to process this information? How much information are they processing? And then is it really supporting the structure of the MOU? And then where can we go next? So as opposed to just giving professional development and adding more steps and more information, it's taken me, for example, it took me, well, let's not talk about how long it took me to figure out how to do the closed captioning, how to do a number of different things when I had videotaped myself to upload. So I think that those are all things we have to consider, and time being a key component in reference to professional development. I don't know if that kind of brings some of the pieces together from my perspective.
Any more thought? Okay, thank you, Kaiser, and everybody else. Any more comments on MOU? I'd like to go to the schedules at some point, relatively short order here. I'll just tee up one thing on the MOU. Was there any discussions on assumptions around handling special education requirements? And I'm looking, and maybe there's, I know it's this whole dedicated track, and maybe it wasn't the appropriate level to fly at in this MOU. I know there's a lot of concerned families out there about what we're going to do and our commitments around special ed. Maybe you can give us some insights, some of the dialogue that happened last couple of days around special ed.
Well, I mean, Derek Ahori is here with us, and so I'll defer to him as well. But when you have an MOU, it's applicable to all of the teachers in the bargaining unit. And so we would be looking for our teachers in special ed to be engaging similarly with their students. Now, obviously, in terms of best practices, there are some differences. There are IEP guidelines or mandates that have to be met. And so, and then there's the whole equity issue. We want to make sure that we're doing, if we have learners who have more difficulty accessing the curriculum, then there needs to be potentially more time given to those learners in some structured capacity. So these are the requirements that are layered over, all members, all bargaining unit members, and then, us working in a nuanced fashion with our special ed teachers to, identify ways to further support is really important. And Derek and I were, chatting over email about a special ed town hall to come up so that we can be clear with parents about what are the additional supports or opportunities for learning with our special needs students. But Derek, I don't know if you would like to comment further.
I agree with everything that you just said. The MOU applies to all the teachers, and our special education teachers will be adjusting their methodologies and everything in order to address the needs of each individual student. We are pivoting quite quickly here. I think that we're on version 3.0 of the secondary schedule in the last week. And so for all of our special education students, we're looking at how we could do in-person learning up until last Friday, where things kind of changed a bit. And at this point, it looks like we may not be able to do that. And so we're adjusting what our plan is and what our ideas are as far as meeting the needs of our students with disabilities. And we are looking at hopefully being able to have a meeting with special education parents next week via Zoom once we've more fully flushed out our plan. But we want to make sure that we're getting input from, for example, we haven't had a chance to talk to the secondary special education teachers yet. And we want to make sure that what it is that we're putting together is something that is feasible to actually go into implementation. We don't want to go too far down the road and then find out that it's not something that would be possible, that there's stumbling blocks along the way that people who aren't on the ground in the schools right now know about that we may not have considered yet.
Well, I would absolutely advocate for a town hall. We kind of talked about doing that after we got past the first round of the general ed. So if we can do that, because I think you might get some unique requirements or suggestions from those families, such as maybe different type of feedback loops related to IEP, things like that that may not be in the general ed. And that'd be great. And I would ask, if you do pull that off, can you let's assign a couple board members to that town hall as well. And I don't know if Derek, you'll be setting that up.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple of names, and whoever's interested in our side, we'll put two names forward to participate so we can stay engaged in this important front.
Great.
I see some of the members off mute. That's usually a signal that they want to talk. I see Kaiser and Andrew off mute. Brent, who wants to talk? Raise your hand.
I'll defer for.
Okay.
Brent,
Kaiser?
no, go ahead, Brent.
No, I was just saying, yeah, I mean, I'd definitely be interested in attending if Derek hosts a town hall for special ed. I think it's a great idea.
Derek, I wanted to just understand it for clarity's sake, and I would love to be at one of those town halls, but I don't need to be. So it's however many board members. I know we can't have more than two, but I just wanted to know in reference to our virtual instruction and virtual setup until we are deemed safe to go back in any capacity. What does that mean in reference to how the paraprofessionals are being used? Is there one-on-one instruction online? What kind of support is being available? Those are the types of details that I would want to see, in addition to the structure and the meeting of the IEP goals and objectives. So for me, that's what I would look for. I don't necessarily need to be in the town hall to be able to get that, as long as I could receive some of that information to see how we're meeting the needs of our children who are in special needs.
Yeah, we would definitely be talking about all of that. Specifics are going to depend on the individual student and what kinds of needs they have, because some require more hand-over-hand support and individual instruction than others do. We're going to be taking a lot of advantage of the Zoom breakout rooms. That was something that we found to be particularly effective during our extended school year period, separating off and having students work with paraprofessionals. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be very frequently used.
And I was just going to add, oh, Kaiser, are you not? Go ahead. I was just going to add that I think that I'm so grateful, Joe, for you bringing it up, and I'm grateful that the district is going to do the town hall. I would push us to push the envelope with this group of students, because they are so vulnerable, you know, to all of the changes, especially so. I mean, this is obviously very difficult for everybody, but it's just a group of students that can way too easily be left behind by all of all the volatility. And I understand that the new governor's order means that we're not all gonna see each other on campus on August 17th, but I would even go as far as to say, I think that there was some very unclear guidance in the Department of Public Health thing that put on Friday that suggested that there may be opportunities for waivers in special circumstances. I don't know much about that other than the very unclear language they provided in that guidance, but I would push the district to maybe get some clarity on that. Are there opportunities? Because if you can imagine, I mean, they're just, the very nature of special education is that it has to just be considered especially, right? And so thinking about the students for whom a virtual learning experience is basically going to mean no learning experience at all. And just the consequence for that, for them, and the consequence for us for not living up to the obligation we have to provide them with a free and appropriate education. So I would just say, all this that we're talking about, to your point about the MOU, Wendy, applying to everyone, and everything we've talked about today about what will be our triggers or not for reopening, that for me is always part of the general education discussion, but that should never preclude the district, in my view, from saying, what are the special circumstances that apply to children with special needs, and what sort of special arrangements can we make for them, including, Kaiser pointed out, can we provide one-on-one instruction? Can we do home visits? Can we have people come to campus in a one-on-one environment? I mean, just whatever it takes to address the fact that for that group of students, you know, not to belabor the point, but it just may be no education at all to say, oh yeah, you know, you have special needs, maybe severe or moderate special needs, you're in 3rd grade here, you know, here's a Zoom for you, you know, so.
I'm sure.
Thank you, Andrew. Highly relevant, appropriate. Yes, Kaiser.
I don't necessarily see, and Andrew, those are really good points that you're bringing up. I don't necessarily see the district in doing that at all and pushing aside. So I appreciate the purposeful intent and effort to try and meet, to dialogue, to get feedback, to discuss. And I know there are some public comments about pursuing waivers. So I would just love to hear more information. And I know we will not push that aside. It has to be front. General and special education populations, we are committed to educating. So I feel comfortable with that. And Derek, I appreciate the feedback and the guidance that you're going to provide under Wendy's leadership as well. Thank you.
Well, and one of the design features that we really appreciated about the secondary schedule, and I want to thank Carolyn and Josh for being here, because they're on the review committee, and they said that they would be here to take comments or give feedback on the schedules. But when we were looking at the challenges at the secondary level to offer sort of an A-B schedule, which is a hybrid schedule where 50% of the students are on campus and the others remain home, and then you switch on a daily basis or switch on a weekly basis. One of the challenges was, you know, it was just so much for teachers to be able to do the recorded lessons and the live instruction. So we thought, if we're going back to the drawing board, what is it about coming to school that keeps kids connected? And what we identified was, you know, if we could potentially bring back students in an after school basis for, you know, small group tutoring, keeping everybody safe, small group SEL, keeping everybody safe, and rotating those opportunities. But the design feature here was to have those opportunities, because our special needs group is such a small population, is to have that be a daily experience for them to be on campus for those augmented specialized services. And so while our gen ed population, you know, if we were virtual, and we could get kids on campus in a limited capacity, socially distanced, and meet all the requirements, would be to do that on a rotating basis for our gen ed population, whereas our special needs learners, as a smaller subset, could be accessing that regularly and intensively, and we would be sort of offsetting some of the learning loss that they're going to experience because of special needs. Now, with the announcement with the governor, we sort of had to pivot again and recognize that our after school small group experiences would necessarily be would for now need to be virtual. But if there is an opportunity for a special ed waiver for that small group experience, that would be something that we would definitely immediately go for, because that would be sort of the first foray into getting kids back on campus and sort of hitting the ground running with our special ed population whose needs are the most severe. And then transitioning to the gen ed learning opportunities in the after school small group setting.
Thanks for the clarity.
Thanks.
Okay, so why don't we, if it feels like we're in a transition, let's go over to the schedules. And that's where I think Josh and Caroline, others could, and then public comments will be important. Why don't we pivot over to the elementary? Any specific comments to the elementary reopening schedules as laid out? I know there were some late breaking suggestions from the TK teachers, and thanks for getting together to look at it closer. And I think one important thing to note is that even if we approved the MOU and the schedules as they exist, Wendy, right, there would be room. We're basically approving start and end time, and there'd be some opportunity for some massaging of those if you later on approved some changes to TK, right? We're not approving the minute by minute, we're approving the start and the end. Is that accurate?
What the board is required to do per board policy is set the start and end time. So we're asking you to do that, but then also take action to sort of approve these schedules. But if there were adjustments that needed to be made within the start and end time, we could look at those opportunities.
We would be delegating that to you
Mhm.
the way we approve it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So any feedback on the elementary? I know a couple of our board members participated quite actively. If you want to represent anything in terms of the schedule, I really like that the schedule allows us to pivot back and forth between fully closed and hybrid and virtual academy. And I think I've really been a fan of the model. There's some tweaks we can make, but I've been a fan of the model since we've been talking about it for the last couple of rounds of meetings. But new thoughts, anything that people want to weigh in on?
Just some of the features is that it's a 5-day schedule. It is it's an AM or PM. So, you still don't have parents with the ability to have full day childcare provided by the district, but you have the consistency of an AM schedule 5 days a week or a PM schedule 5 days a week. And through the asynchronous offerings and through the independent practice instruction that the teachers would be building into their lesson design, students would essentially have a full day of instruction with, if they're an AM student, the PM being the independent practice, being the asynchronous lessons. And, it's in terms of a hybrid model, I think it gives us as much flexibility. Plus we can build our classroom placements for the year with this design. And so, 1 to 11, let's say we're talking first through third, 1 to 11 ratios, AM, PM, that's consistent until we hit stage 3. And when we're all available to come back on a full day schedule, those ratios then become full day at 1 to 22. I don't know if there are questions or other feedback from the committee members about features of this schedule that are positive or that may represent challenges.
I do want to highlight that I first appreciate all the work that went into dialoguing and discussing and making changes. And I know we keep changing the additions based on what's coming from public health. So I guess flexibility is the key word for this year. But I want to just make sure that we understand that the issues I think are going to come up and have to be addressed as we move forward and engage with the students. and the families. I do appreciate and want to just comment on the fact that parents are being asked to truly be participatory in this process, especially for our youngest children. I think there are opportunities to engage with our youngest of children, but I appreciate the kindergarten team meeting and coming up with some schedules that allows for some steps away from being face-to-face or online for long periods of time. I do think that that's important for us to address for our youngest children, and to allow the teachers to be flexible. And if you could clarify, Wendy, what that flexibility might look like. And Joe, I know you had commented, how much of that do we mandate or not mandate, et cetera?
Well, I think, and I just had an opportunity to look briefly at the TKK proposal. I think where its strengths lie are in that the virtual screen time for developmentally for those learners it's a challenge to think that they would be potentially 3 hours on the AM or PM and then accessing asynchronous virtual instruction and all of that. I think where the challenge lies with their proposal is it becomes an increasingly short day for those learners. And that just complicates the parent experience with regard to childcare and support and all of that. So I think we have to look at it through the dual lens of, what's manageable within the context of the virtual environment, what's developmentally appropriate. We were trying to build, we created the 1:15 ratios in TK and K. So I'd want to go back to the principals to make sure that could be accommodated in the physical space, because you would have to make sure we had 6 feet of social distancing and make sure that that's allowable, because this schedule only works without those loading capacities. And so there's more to engage there.
Wendy, in regards to this schedule, I was fielding some emails last week and then also some questions on Facebook yesterday about parents being able to request AM versus PM. And I know we had mentioned this earlier in another board meeting, but I didn't know where we had landed. If I don't think we'd be able to accommodate everyone's, but that was an interest from the community, just depending on their working schedules.
No, and I appreciate that. It sort of, it mirrors the request, only it's now school-wide, but when you have AM and PM in kindergarten, we can't guarantee that a parent's request is accommodated. We do take requests and, look to those more significant cases and try to identify where we can be responsive. But it's just, just blanketly, it's too difficult to say we're going to meet the request of every parent. So it'll be sort of assigned, and then requests taken as possible. Probably dependent on capacity and family dynamics.
Maybe I can chat with our elementary school principals and see what mechanism they have in place for kinder and how they handle that, and then we can work on that. Okay.
The other thing that we have committed to doing is keeping families on the same schedule. So that would be something that we would make a priority. But then having those schedules be assigned to family preference, I don't know.
But to clarify, it was families on the same schedule who had multiple students within K through 6, right? Mm-hmm. It's harder to cut across upper and lower.
Right.
So then that should be our first priority, to get families assigned into the same AM PM cohort. And then next would be preference if there was room for flexibility. Okay.
Any more comments on the elementary? I see Caroline Anderson would like to say something. She's been one of our active committee members. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, obviously, for having parents be included in these committees. I think it's really valuable to have us on here and be able to, get the lay of the land from the whole district. I've talked to a lot of teachers and parents, and they've kind of seen the 7-12 model where there's an SEL function in the afternoon so that they get some time face-to-face with kids. And elementary teachers wanted had spoken to me and asked if there was going to be a time for them that we could carve out so that they actually get to spend some time with their kids in person and to build a relationship also.
One of the challenges there, if we're talking, we're trying to accomplish so much. If you're building this structure to provide for virtual and then not having to reorganize and reshuffle everything when you have the opportunity to go to hybrid with some students on campus, in order to maintain that, you need an AM PM schedule. The benefits of that was that it was a 5-day-a-week schedule, 5-day-a-week, roughly 3 hours in the AM or the PM. If you continue with that and take advantage of all the benefits that it offers, what you're precluding or eliminating is that opportunity like we've built into the secondary level. Because with the AM and the PM, that is allowing for your 50% loading. And essentially what it's done, it's taken your whole day. Whereas with the secondary schedule, we've shortened the periods or shortened the blocks to free up afternoons to allow for that on-campus opportunity for SEL, campus connectedness, all of that. And so, what you have with the secondary right now is it's still an all virtual model. We haven't gone to the hybrid model yet. When we go to the hybrid model, it's going to be increasingly difficult to keep those opportunities for small group instruction. And so at the elementary, what we have is we have the ability to shift and go immediately to hybrid, but what you would get with the hybrid is kids being on campus, and that would essentially be their small group experience. It's an opportunity to be on campus for half the day.
But Wendy, I know Dan had brought up something also that on the front end of the school year, maybe at the K through 6, that there's some built-in mechanism for teachers to maybe small group meet with their kids, develop the relationship. I'm not sure what that would look like. Dan, you want to elaborate? Is that was something you brought up? Is that some front loading, at least some of those building some of those relationships, connections that would then carry through their virtual assignments?
Well, I think it was the concept of what we all liked in the secondary school schedules of some sort of smaller get-togethers, whether it be a small group via Zoom or when it's possible to do a small group in person, an outside small group. I think that appealed to a lot of the parents as well as a lot of the educators. And so I thought that the idea was if we could do something like that for our elementaries to give an opportunity to have maybe a less formal, fewer kids involved opportunities to just kind of get to know each other a little bit better would be nice.
I mean, something you could look at, and like I said, I think that once we have the schedules in place, I think there's going to be some outside the box thinking able to be done with our principals and with site logistics. And it's just something that comes to mind. Right now, we don't even have the green light on having kids on campus. But if we could get that, you could, have an experience where, on a Friday, and we talk about early bird, late bird, all day birds, so you could have AM, PM, and on particular Fridays, you could have all kids be AM, and, on those scheduled Fridays or, whatever day you picked, if they were calendared, you could have, everybody be AM. We're going to, on this day, have, the less satisfactory full group Zoom experience or full group instruction, but provide for the afternoon, individualized small group ability for kids to come on campus and engage in that, socially distanced experience with live instruction. But until we even have the green light for kids being back on campus, that's something that has to be developed. But there are ways with this model that you could, signal or calendar, specific opportunities where families had enough advance notice to adjust for, a PM to become an AM for one day, so that the afternoons were opened up for, the small group on campus experience. You're on mute, Joe.
We need to be moving on pretty quick here. We have a lot of public comments to go through still also. Any more comments on the elementary? Thank you, Caroline. I think that's something we got to make sure we pay attention to and how to work those opportunities into the elementary level, SCL. Any other comments before we move to the discussion on the upper? Okay, let's move on to the upper. Again, now the two committee members that were on with us. I know I was on the upper. I think Kiter, you were as well, right?
No, I was elementary.
Okay.
It was Dan.
Oh, it's Dan. That's right. Apologize, Dan. And then Caroline and Josh were both on the upper with us. I know we went through several iterations. We pulled some things off the table because as we put forward earlier models, when we pressure tested it, we got feedback. There were some gaps and some issues. So we've gone through an iterative, fast moving discussion on here. I know this has been fast evolving, but I think I was pretty happy where it was landing at the end of last week because everybody's been so engaged along the way. And I think you said it up front, Wendy, we kind of ended up with a model, the opening model that is in large part what we're all familiar with. And I think staff was, at least admin staff was pretty excited about what that might look like. So I'll turn it over for discussion. Any comments on the upper schedules as proposed?
Yeah, Joe, maybe I'll start. I very much like the schedule we landed on at Wendy's proposing with the block and the opportunity for after school. I think that's a very nice schedule for what you're calling stage one when we're in this place. And I think that the problem we had as a committee was trying to figure out what a stage school 2 hybrid schedule would look like, because we could not come up with one that worked well in terms of reducing the exposure by reducing the cohorts. It just, in order to offer the wide variety of classes that we want at 7 through 12, the electives, the APs, the music programs, choir, all those different programs that we want to offer, we can't do that and keep the cohort small. So my concern is that I don't know that we have a workable stage 2 plan. And if we don't have a workable stage 2 plan, are we really in a place where we're saying for 7 through 12, we're either in stage 1 or stage 3? Since we're asking the parents to commit, and I see the difference on the commitment is if you commit to online learning, you're staying in that stage through 1 and 2. If on the other hand, you're interested in going in person, then you're only committing to being online for stage 1. And I think we haven't really defined stage 2.
No, that's a good point, Dan. We don't have a plan for, we don't have a hybrid at this point. The idea was that if we do virtual learning really, really well and provide, when it's open, the opportunity for on-campus experiences, we're at least keeping our social emotional connectedness, providing opportunities for skill building and tutoring where it lends itself. There's supports, and then you're not having the isolation that we saw, with kids not being anywhere near campus for long periods of time and just coming to pick up their books or drop off their materials and crying because they've been so removed from campus. So, one of the next steps for the committee is to, work on what does the hybrid model look like. We've been doing a lot of research with other schools, other school districts and their proposed models. So there are some proposals, but we haven't landed on one yet. And so that's why with the high school, the secondary 7-12 model, we've always been looking at the commitment being by quarter. So because we know we're going to be in stage 1, we know that this opportunity works virtually. We know that it builds the social emotional connections initially as, the after school virtual connections. If things get better and we have more, if the campus opens, and we still have the opportunity for on-campus learning experience, on-campus social emotional development, but it's the on-campus instruction that still hasn't been developed with a hybrid schedule.
I can say as a committee member, I think, well, a couple of things. I think because we ended up where we sort of began in terms of schedule, a little clarity on the process, I think, is important. And one of the things is that we, when we first met, and we were meeting once or twice a week, and we had a group of parents, some who were doctors, we had some who had students across both elementary and high school. We've had, you know, just a variety of parents. And then we had a variety of teachers. We had special ed teachers, we had elective teachers, we had core teachers, we had 7, 8 teachers. And we basically went for a few days and looked at every possible schedule and spent a lot of time sort of, as Joe said, pressure testing each of those schedules. So, you know, this idea of, oh, what about if we drill down to a smaller number of classes per quarter? Or what about if we're all block? Or what about if there's no block? Or what about if it's everybody's on campus? Or, you know, we looked at everything. And by having all these different stakeholders, it became relatively obvious which options could be crossed off pretty quickly. So we did that. And then there was a point where we got to a sort of hybrid schedule that I don't think people on the committee were especially happy with, but it was an option. And then essentially we started talking about our online only option. And I don't know, I can't speak for every other committee member, but for me, it was like a light bulb went off that really this was a far superior option to the hybrid option we had come up with. And so at that point, I think as a committee, we sort of decided to table the hybrid discussion because we really felt like we were on to something with this other schedule. Now that ended up being a little prescient because then the governor stopped us from doing what we you know, anything anyway, but we were already sort of a little ahead of the curve, realizing that A, it looked like we were trending that way, and B, that schedule was much stronger. So even though we did kind of land there where we started, I think we spent a lot of time thinking, and I do think that the committee kind of stopped dealing with the hybrid schedule just for a moment so we could nail down this online only schedule. But I think there are you know, a lot of people who are interested in looking at what is possible hybrid. And I think we have a number of committee meetings still scheduled to sort of jump back into that once we nail this down.
Thanks, Josh. Anybody else like to weigh in? Caroline, you were part of that committee. What are your thoughts?
You're muted.
I agree with Josh. You know, it was funny when we were all sitting there and at the very end, we're like, this is exactly like the schedule that we would have gone to if you were going back to school. And it seemed like, wow, we've been meeting for weeks and weeks and came to something that was what we were already doing. I think this will be, when we do go back to school, it's an easy transition for them because it's the same exact schedule block-wise or daily load. So I agree with everyone. Our work is to figure out how to get what 2 is, because we have 1 and 3 and we still have work to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for me, it was kind of the epiphany that, you know, I'm on so many Zoom meetings and someone flipped back to me. We'll see, maybe as you, Carol, somebody said this to me, it's pretty funny. If you're fatigued on Zoom, think what the kids are going to be if they're fatigued on Zoom all day long, right? I'm like, you're absolutely right. And so this schedule ended up not doing 5 or 6 subjects a day. The block allows to make that more minimal. And as you think about kids not trying to digest so much every single day, it allows them mentally to have less is more. 2 or 3 big things to prepare for, and I move through the day. And I put myself in the shoes of the person being, again, the Zoom fatigue factor. And that's just a loose representation of being in, you know, for whatever the virtual environment platform is. That was important, where where we landed for me, that this felt that we're on the right track. And thinking through the teachers also and the students in this discussion, the right balance.
One thing to think about that, you know, it's just in with transparency as our goal. If we're talking, I mean, when we're looking at all of these schedules, if high school students need to change classes once they're on campus, what you're looking at is cohorts mixing. You're looking at, you know, a pretty severe viral load. You're looking at teacher risk with up to, you know, 90 student contacts a day. So one of the things I think that I should put out there that might be a reality is our hybrid model may be bringing kids back on campus in an A-B fashion. And you essentially maintain a pure cohort by going to your class and accessing all of your learning remotely in that classroom to serve our function as a school district to give families the relief that they need with childcare. But if let's say that that's the best that we can do in order to meet the terms of the virus and have pure cohorts and not have mixing, we keep this schedule and we have then the afternoons for the small group experiences and the time to socialize, build the teacher relationships, have that real on, live, present, on campus, experience. So we may be keeping this schedule and building an A/B model that keeps cohorts pure, but essentially has the online learning accessed at school to meet the function or the needs of, of working parents. So, it's not the most attractive, but it may be something to just plant the seed with families. But at least it has the opportunities in the afternoon for people to engage with humans in small groups on a scheduled fashion.
And I think that gets back to the point I made earlier about what we're asking our parents to do. We're asking them to commit by next week for 7 through 12. If they want to be all in, that is, they want to be there for stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, or if they want to be in a place where they're distance learning, meaning they're only there in stage 1 distance, and then stage 3, if we get to it, where everyone comes back. And I think that's the challenge, that we haven't really defined what stage 2 looks like. So I don't know what parents would opt into in that scenario.
And Dan, I think that's a really valid point for 7-12. It may be that we're not there yet for people to make those informed decisions. I do think, though, at the elementary level, because we've got the AM, PM schedule and we do know what stage 2 looks like, parents might, if we need to do a little bit of aggressive marketing so that parents are clear for what they're opting into with the virtual experience for a year or a long, period. But I think that it's a good criticism, 7-12. I think that we have more information, TK6.
And I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think that we've defined it well for elementary so that parents will know what their choices are, what their decision points are. They have a pretty good idea of what things are going to look like under both scenarios. So my comments apply only to 7 to 12.
As a point of reference, we have 446 students enrolled in the TK6 Virtual Academy and 306 7-12th grade.
Can we hear some public comments?
Yes,
Jamie,
I was
can you give
thinking
us
I was first thinking, Jamie, we had 400 comments accrued. And then I was getting a little scared, but then you changed it. Okay, so I think it is appropriate, and we can weave in more thoughts on the model as we go. But I think it's really important to hear and form some more of our discussion by hearing from the public. Okay, everybody okay with that? All right, so Jamie, let's pivot over. I'm not sure if you just did first come, first read. Is that how we're going to do it? Because there's no need to sort it, right? It's general comments across all models, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'll just go down the list. And some of them have been answered. We did have some of the public say if their question was answered, we don't have to read them. And I don't know if we specifically hit them exactly, so I'll just kind of adjust as we go down the list. All right, so our first comment comes from Nicole Pizzos, LCUSD parent, and she writes, is there an option on the table that would include the use of large outdoor tents or classes in pods? With the rise of crime and both parents working, it is a safety issue when some parents are not able to afford getting childcare during school hours. This is definitely a difficult time for everyone, and was hoping to have some other out-of-the-box options on the table for those children that will be forced to stay home and do online learning without parental supervision. I'm sure our parents that have this issue would pitch in to cover some of the costs associated with providing outdoor schooling. I'm aware many teachers do not want to teach in such small quarters as a classroom, but if we could provide an outdoor learning experience, much like outdoor dining, I'm certain most teachers would be okay teaching. Next, excuse me. This comment comes from Emily Venkatachelam, and she writes,
can I interrupt just real quickly?
Oh, please.
I feel like we probably needed to just respond real quickly, and I was on mute and couldn't get myself off it.
Sure.
So with regard to Nicole's, I think that there are challenges there. I think with that outside the box thinking is always of benefit, But I think that the requiring teachers to come on campus, I'm hearing that there's, as we're negotiating the MOU, that unless, if we're closed for everyone via the governor's orders, requiring teachers or working with teachers to bring them on campus isn't something that's likely we're going to be successful in negotiating. But I think that us exploring opportunities for potential childcare and accessing, the virtual instruction in a supervised environment on campus once the campus is reopened, maybe not supervised necessarily by a teacher. Maybe, it's paraprofessional supervision with district administration oversight or something. I think those are things that we need to look at. But I don't think that when we're in a situation where the campuses aren't open, that teachers will be willing to come on campus and risk their own health. But more to look at and more to follow.
Thank you. Sorry. This one, as I said, Emily, sorry, make sure I say that correctly. Emily Venkatachelam, and she writes, "It is sadly clear that the quarantine is having a substantial negative impact on the mental health of our children, particularly teenagers and those with pre-existing mental health conditions. Indeed, a survey conducted by Harris Poll on behalf of the National 4-H Council and published in June found that 70% of teens self-report struggling with mental health during this period, with 43% citing depression and 61% citing extreme loneliness. Teens told surveyors that on an average, they're spending a horrifying 75% of their working hours on screens. This report can be downloaded here. I understand the limitations of hosting in-person activities due to the Governor Newsom's stay-at-home order, but are there any creative ways that LCUSD can sponsor or provide guidance on any outdoor social clubs or activities that would help to support the mental health of our children in this difficult time? Perhaps things like running clubs, outdoor Tai Chi, bring your own supply art classes on the football field, or anything. As a parent, I'm worried that if we don't have close social activities to start sending our teenagers to, they will potentially start engaging in antisocial activities or simply wilt in front of screens."
And I think
Wendy, if I might say something really fast on this, whether it's outdoor or indoor, I have heard from several parents that leveraging our strong network of clubs and after school, maybe there's a way to activate that even virtually. Now we got to do it equitably, right? That's part of our marching orders, that we do that in a way that has access. But if there's a way that once we get going, that we can find ways to get kids involved and networked and feel part of something, even outside the typical extracurricular activities, all those ASB and the clubs are a phenomenal resource too. And I think there's a network of parents be willing to help us step up and get that up and going when teachers are worried about other things. Just a thought.
Right. And I think that the schedule that we've built really lends itself to those, opportunities. At first virtually, which I know isn't optimal because of the screen time that we're seeing with our students. But then, once we can open up the campus, even on a very limited capacity, the schedule that we've created provides the opportunity to do that with the small group, opportunities and the small group structure. Also, just to speak to this, we are engaged in a contract, and I'll give Jim Cartnell a shout out. Also our Wellness Center staff, Rachel Zoe and her colleagues. But we've entered into a contract with Care Solace, which is an organization that families can work with to access, to find mental health services, because sometimes just finding those resources is so difficult. And so we'll be rolling that out so parents know that there are some extra resources that will provide to our community for just how to get supports that are sometimes really hidden or hard to come by. And so this is an agency that helps families find supports for mental health.
Yeah, Wendy, I think I'd also add, we're kind of operating in the dark on terms of what we can and cannot do. I tried to find the actual county health department order. I've not been able to find the actual order. And so I don't know whether the order will say we cannot do anything that involves bringing kids to school in any capacity, or if it'll be a more limited order saying we can't have regular classrooms. And I think that'll help inform us as to whether we can do small groups, whether we can do individual sessions for IEPs. I think we're a little bit in the dark on that still, unless you've seen something more recently.
No, we have Los Angeles County Office of Education, all of our superintendents have a call in with Dr. Farrar on Thursday. So I was going to forward a question about the opportunity for small group student presence on campus and just try to see if we have any clarity that we can bring to it. Because you're right, exactly right, Dan. We are assuming that the campuses, the school facilities are closed, but I don't think many people were thinking about the structure or the design that we are proposing with not classes meeting, but small group experiences. And I haven't heard anybody address that specifically.
Well, we did, again, Senator Portantino reached out to us around any clarifications based on the governor's orders that we wanted. And that was one of the questions we pushed back. Would there be any flexibility around small group type activity on campus, or does this preclude us from anything? And so hopefully Anthony is able to advocate, and if we hear back. So we're pushing from different channels, right? So if you do it at the county level, Anthony's been a proven advocate in getting some responses back from the governor's office and helping them shape some of the scope of what they put out. So maybe we'll see something positive come from that channel as well.
And I think also, we also need to think about it in terms of it may be different for the 7 through 12 level than it is at the elementary, but we would like to see what we can do at both groups for some sort of small group contact.
And then one of the things I think that Josh was really eloquent in our secondary committees is that if these small group experiences are an all hands on deck experience, so that we're not only, relying on our teachers to facilitate them, but our administrators, our paraprofessionals, our counselors, then we have much more opportunity to make sure that every kid is engaged in some of that campus connection. And I could see that us building something like that out potentially at the elementary with counselors or with the principals, or maybe even with, cadre of parent volunteers. A teacher's day with the AM PM on the elementary site is really, really packed and are impacted. But maybe if it's an all hands on deck effort, there are some opportunities for other adults to help facilitate these small group after school, engagement opportunities.
All right, our next comment comes from Doris Lee, and she writes, currently the LCUSD special education web page provides minimal info, nothing on distance learning. Will it be updated with today's decision to better communicate with IEP and 504 families? For example, methods of distance learning, contact information for school sites 504 coordinator and case manager. Thank you.
Yes, we can work on that, Doris, to build that out. Derek, can I sort of assign you to take a look at that?
Yes.
Thanks.
Jessica Molheim writes, in regards to special education students in the distance learning model, are there any one-on-one services available for our kids when they are struggling with a subject or skill? At the 712, will Mrs. Dean still have her STEP or homeroom to support social and emotional well-being of our kids? Are there any aides or teachers who will be available for one-to-one services for children who need them? What is the plan to provide that?
Yeah, I think that what we'll be working on, and we can sort of articulate that at our special ed meeting that Dr. Ihori referenced, is that we'll be fully utilizing our paraprofessionals. They're getting much more skilled with things like the breakout rooms. We had hired Laura Stramitz, who is a retired special education teacher last year, to oversee the paraprofessionals, because our special education teachers, again, were so impacted. But I think we can look at sort of strengthening and reinstituting that model. But there are a lot of opportunities. STEP isn't built into this current schedule, but you sort of see the after school experience being the counterpart to STEP, where, after the regular end of the instructional day, there would be opportunities once students can be on campus for the special ed services to be being provided after period 6 up until 3:15.
Second question from Jessica. What about kids and families who are either new to LCUSD or kids or families who are only beginning to realize their child needs special ed help? What is the plan? What plan is in place to offer testing that is required in identifying special education needs? What's the plan to conduct the testing required to back up the IEPs? All the tests that are given by the psychiatrists, they have fancy names, but they help identify learning issues and therapeutic strategies.
Okay, and I think that Jessica is very much in tune to the challenges that we'll be facing. Our students who have IEPs, there'll be a lot of required testing. I know Dr. Ahori is really gearing up for all that being an all hands on deck request and requirement. We are obligated to do all of the testing that she mentions here, and it's going to even further escalate the demands when you add to the picture the kids and families who are new to LCUSD or who are beginning to realize that the testing may be required to identify a student who hasn't tested into special education yet. So I can't articulate the level of challenge. We're going to fully embrace it. It's being faced by all districts throughout the nation, but just the sheer volume of the requirements that are going to be faced, that our special ed teachers and staff and districts and communities are going to face is going to be phenomenal. And so we will address it. We have plans in place. We'll probably have to spend significant dollars or some of our, significant amounts of our learning loss dollars in this area. We know it's a challenge, and, we are continuing to try to find ways to meet the needs that are articulated in this very well-structured question.
Next question comes from Tracy Louie. She writes, thank you LCUSD governing board staff and reopening committees for all of your hard work. Trying to choose between a virtual academy and hybrid learning when in-person instruction allowed by July 26 has been difficult for me and other parents too. I appreciate the added safety of the virtual academy versus hybrid learning. The only thing holding me back from choosing the virtual academy is the uncertainty of whether this will be an effective learning approach for my child. Rather than just these two options, would it please be possible to have 3 options for registration? Commit to 100% virtual, commit to hybrid when in-person is allowed, or undecided. Elementary student cohorting could be done so that virtual academy students are grouped together in stable cohorts. Hybrid students are grouped together in stable cohorts, and undecided students are grouped together initially. At a later time, when either in-person instruction is either allowed or halfway through the school year, the parents of the undecided students could decide whether to remain online or move to hybrid instruction. I'm having a hard time committing to distance learning for a full year without knowing how it will work out for my child, but I would be happy to commit to distance learning through the first semester, with the option to reassess for the second semester. If my child is able to learn well during the state mandated distance learning period at the beginning of the school year, then I would be comfortable continuing with distance learning the rest of the school year. I know this might complicate things administratively, but undecided parents would greatly appreciate the opportunity to make a more informed decision.
Thank you. That is something for us to definitely look at.
And lots of discussion already on this very point. So.
Mm-hmm. Please consider reopening on a Monday, barring any holidays. This would allow, this comes from Mickey Whiteman. Please consider reopening on a Monday, barring any holidays. This would allow teachers the opportunity for the conversion to the physical classroom and for the weekly virtual schoolwork to be completed. It would also allow students who require additional transition time and or assist in lowering anxiety upon the change. So I imagine she's speaking when we would be able to move back to on-campus or hybrid learning.
Okay, thank you.
And the next one comes from Proactive Parents, and this person writes, first, we extend tremendous gratitude for your Herculean efforts to plan for this difficult set of circumstances. You're doing a remarkable job. Thank you. Not surprisingly, parents have not sat idle. We're making plans too. One approach being taken by elementary parents who are not satisfied with isolated distance learning, but who are also not comfortable sending our kids to campus, is to form small pods consisting of a small set of other like-minded family with same age kids. The idea being to share the burden with a weekly rotation to each family's home, thereby freeing up the other parents during the off weeks. It also offers the children a social aspect greatly missing if done independently at home for potentially the entire year. Additionally, some pods look to augment with a qualified tutor or TA that would assist and enrich the virtual academy experience. This person would serve as a constant despite the weekly rotation, and also would not be a parent, which from our experience would be a benefit, as many kids seem to learn better for someone other than their own parents. The plan makes a lot of sense to us and would be ideal for our kids, save for one big wrinkle. What happens when the kids we pair get different teachers, or more significantly, get different AM PM schedules? How can we make that work? Has any consideration been given towards building more flexibility into the plans or schedules to allow for this reality? Because that's what's happening out there right now. While we all hope COVID improves for school to reach phase 3 sooner than later, we parents have to plan for the worst case. And the absolute worst case for us is for our 6 to 8-year-old child to be stuck at home alone in front of a small screen for 155 minutes with their busy, frustrated parent trying their best to provide oversight and assistance. Shared pods make sense from the perspective, but we're concerned they're not going to be supported by the school.
I've heard on the news and read a number of articles about parents looking at, micro schooling and these types of shared pods. It becomes very difficult to schedule, but I think that, we want to support our families. I see that this is a very insightful way that parents might be approaching the virtual learning experience. I don't know immediately how to respond to this question, but there may be some opportunities for us to be in communication. If you have developed a pod that you're going to pursue, I'd appreciate that you reach out to the district. If we have that information when we're building classes, we might be able to accommodate it, or we might be able to, not right here on the fly with a live meeting, structure a way to take this information into account to help build our class loading in concert with your pod loading.
I actually wanted to add that I appreciate this group of parents, or one parent, I can't remember if it was a group, that I have heard a lot of parents talking about the development of these pods. And I was really looking at it from a different perspective, is how can we, and how early or when do we get the schedule out so that parents can build pods together, if that is the choice that they're making. So I think, Wendy, we're looking at it from two different perspectives, but I think it's an interesting way to address the needs of meeting some of our parents' needs.
Well, and our goal was to have the 100% virtual academy and the pre-registrations close on Sunday. And then for us to be loading to be creating the classes and loading the AM, PM throughout the course of next week. If families were in a position, once we announced, classes and teachers and AM and PM, to build their pods according to, what was assigned by the district, that would be ideal. I know it wouldn't be every person in your friendship group necessarily having the same schedule or the same teacher, but you would, I think that we're a pretty connected community. And so there might be some opportunity for just, if we get the information out sooner versus later, then there might be parents being able to build their pods off of what the district, where the kids have landed.
I think that's a good point, Wendy, because as this group of parents said, this is a Herculean effort on the part of the administration. So I think if we look at what the schedule is and then see if pods can be built around that, obviously there's a lot of adjustments that have to be made, but truly appreciate it. Yeah. There is the outside the box thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've heard the same thing, but I'd also challenge that even if a group of pods end up on an AM PM split, the day is still the same length, right? That if one family is hosting, some of the kids could be working on the AM piece, and some kids could be working on the enrichment programs. And I would think if it's a childcare is one of their main objectives, and to spread the burden, I would still think that I could try to, my family would try to make an AM PM split even work still. And you have the kids going different parts of the house or something, but I don't know. It is really innovative, and whatever we can do to accommodate, maybe it is just getting out the schedule earlier so they can react to our plan.
Our next comment comes from Kelsey Larson, LCUSD parent. I urge the board to approve the reopening plan for elementary that was presented at the last meeting, which included a hybrid in-person option. While I understand the governor's order may mean students in the hybrid option may have to start school with distance learning, we need to preserve the ability to pivot seamlessly to in-person instruction. Our youngest learners need in-person instruction. The board administration should also monitor the data frequently and consider seeking a waiver to permit in-person instruction for our elementary students. We are small, elite district and should be doing everything we can to get our elementary students back into the classroom for families who prefer that option. Thank you for that, Kelsey. Definitely part of our plan.
Yeah, and we have to look at the waiver option.
Next, this comes from an angry parent. In spring of 2020, distance learning was an utter failure. Our child's kindergarten teacher only hosted 4 optional Zooms in a 3-month period and was not proactive about engaging students and parents. Our daughter did not learn anything in this period. In fact, she actually regressed. We have great concerns about distance learning. How can the district guarantee that teachers will be giving sufficient face time to students in a distance learning model? And I know we covered a lot of the guidance, the requirements through the MOU and how there's significant structural change that's going to be in place to support our youngest learners. And I can also report on some of the work that I've been doing with our primary teachers. I have a select group of teachers who've been working with me on reflecting on how the last term went and identifying kind of the challenges and needs related to technology. And so some of the things they've asked me for are very specific training on the uses of Zoom and apps. They want to unify the tools they're expecting their students to use. They're talking about prepared materials to get to families and students for assignments and projects. They're also talking about getting stronger at creating lessons for asynchronous access for those who would need it. They've requested that we have all student accounts ready before school starts. And so the tech department's working really hard on that because we know that that was a challenge for our little ones to pivot so quickly to online learning. And they also are working hard at creating the appropriate live structures for the learning because they want to focus on both small group learning as well as office hours. So know that there's, I have access to an 8-page planning doc right now with some of our primary teachers regarding the technology side of it. And they're really working to put together a solid program.
Jamie, thank you for that. Sorry, Andrew, real quick. One of the things I'm hearing too, we brought up early on was thinking of it from the parent backwards, especially at 7 through 12, where there's so many combinations of teachers communicating, deadlines, content, things like that, that with that committee, if there are ways to unify, kind of create that parent portal so it's not so many things flying at parents through different channels of communication, that'd be helpful, right? Emails from one channel, texts over here, you know, it was really hard for some of the parents to manage the permutations of things hitting them. And the more that the primary can kind of sync all that up, that'd be a big win for the parents. Sorry,
yeah,
Andrew,
and I think that's what we had mentioned in the MOU specifically as a common platform so we can make that a reality.
And I was just going to suggest that as you make a final push ahead of these registration deadlines, that in addition to making folks aware of these new guardrails as defined by the MOU, highlighting some of that work could be really meaningful. I think a parent mentioned on one of the opening committees that, you know, fresh on everyone's minds when they think about virtual learning is the experience of switching under duress, you know, switching under sort of the worst version of circumstances. But I also, so I think parents should expect that this transition to virtual learning is going to look very different than one that happened in the midst of such you know, of the circumstances of March. But I also think they shouldn't just take our word for it. It's not just that there's more time in between then and now, it's that that time has been really invested in pretty wisely by a lot of teachers, by obviously you, Jamie, by the district. So I don't think it needs to be super elaborate, but just outlining for parents that it's not just that we have these new expectations, it's also that there's been this investment in training and professional development and resources. It might make parents take more for granted that what the experience is going to be in the fall is not going to be the same as what the experience was in the spring.
Our next comment comes from RJ Falaska, and this person writes, when the county deems it as safe for the kids to return to school, how quickly can the school transition from 100% distance learning to the AM/PM hybrid model proposed during the board meeting? Can you confirm the district has a plan to quickly transition to in-person learning when it is safe to do so?
And I think that that's the strength of the model, is that it transitions pretty seamlessly. Chief amongst the district's charge, once the schedules are adopted, is to work individually with teachers so that the workstation and the classroom is safe, and there's all the PPE that's necessary all set up. So basically we would have our facilities completely prepared to open, and teachers fully comfortable with how their classrooms are situated, classrooms and cohorts designed, and literally you just go from AM/PM virtual to AM/PM in class.
But that does go back to what we talked about up front with Andrew's call for the triggers, and not just what the county deems safe, but the state level too. So there's some things, and even if they declare it safe, what's the roller coaster ride we want to put parents through? So we might need to have some structured dates that we agree upon that we would be willing to pivot if these things are deemed safe. So those are still some really, really critical things to iron out. I just don't know we'll get to them today, but it should be really high up on our objective things to nail down.
And it also brings up the point that our pivoting is much easier for the elementary school because we sort of have a plan in place and an idea for what to do with the elementary schools. I don't know that the pivoting for 7 through 12 is as easy to accomplish, and we may even have to consider different pivot points.
And I mean, naturally, they have different calendars as well. We have trimester at the elementary and then quarter and semester at the high school.
And, but we could use, even without the hybrid model that we have yet to develop, if we kept this schedule and did the 50% loading and had kids come on campus to access the virtual instruction, you would have the childcare demands met, and you would have kids back on campus with the after school social emotional small group learning. Now, I think we will investigate the opportunities for a hybrid model, but in the current design, there is some capacity for an AM/PM or not an AM/PM, an AB model based on what we currently have.
That protects or enables small cohort numbers, which was the other big gap that we had, right? That model is very interesting to kind of resurrect and talk about further.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Our next comment comes from Doris Lee, and she was requesting the special education town hall. So I'm going to feel comfortable that we've got that agendized and that will be coming. So thank you for your comment, Doris. Next comes from a concerned PCY parent, and this parent writes, as a parent and an educator, I fear there will be a great disparity in education throughout the district if district learning is used the same way it was and used for spring of 2020. Our 3 months personal experience with distance learning for our young children in spring was beyond challenging and completely unsuccessful as our children's social emotional skills regressed, our kids' enthusiasm and excitement for school decreased, and none of our children's educational needs were met. Our children were provided with one lesson plan daily, which was distributed to all students in their class with no differentiation or individual feedback. Our kids lost days of instruction in spring of 2020 due to having no instruction every other Friday. And my child's last day of class ended 2 days earlier than noted in the 2019-2020 school year calendar. No learning occurred and it was devastating. The distance learning demonstrated in spring 2020 is ultimately a complete failure for our family. I'm concerned about going into 2021 school year with distance learning. Number one, how will the district improve distance learning for our kids TK6? How will the district ensure kids equally receive a full education with distance learning with each teacher's learning environment at home is different from, and teachers' approaches and practices to distance learning vary? What are the specific, clear, reasonable expectations of teachers and parents with distance learning, and will these requirements be across grade level in schools? How will parents of young children be expected to navigate various special programs with the regular course subject classroom when they have other responsibilities they're managing as well? And I know we talked a lot about this, but with requirements, but any additional comments for this concerned parent?
Well, I appreciate the concerns. I also think it's dangerous in these difficult times to speak in all or none, or just, I think that people in the spring did the best they could. I think there was learning that occurred, maybe to varying degrees, but absolutes are dangerous, and I think they don't serve a collaborative spirit of growth and progress. We have the district learning requirements, and so I think that answers question number one. I think that it is a challenge with all of the nuances described in question 2. Our principals are charged with working with our teachers, monitoring compliance, providing support. Every child's learning environment at home is different. Every teacher's learning environment or teaching instructional environment at home is different. And so, uniformity is ideal. It's not always practicable. And so we'll do our best, and we'll continue to provide the resources to try to level that playing field. The clear, reasonable expectations of teachers has been articulated. With parents, I have to reiterate that we are, asking your full partnership more so than ever before. It is simply, especially with our youngest learners, parent, if it's, we will open virtually. And for parents, those children are young developmentally. They need the supports. If they're learning from home, they will need the support from whoever is facilitating the virtual instruction in the home. And I know that's a huge demand. I know that it's a huge challenge. We're investigating supports for families, but there will be a certain amount of just required partnership that puts a stress on the home. And I recognize that, and I'm empathetic to it. And we continue to look for ways to support our parents. I think that attending some of the technology sessions for parents may be helpful, but looking at other opportunities that we could provide. Navigating the various special programs along with the regular core subjects, those will be asynchronous. Largely GATE will be somewhat synchronous and Spanish will be somewhat synchronous, but the other opportunities will be asynchronous. I think that allows families to work with their own schedules at their own pace and accessed opportunities. So we are trying to be as differentiated as possible with our instructional model. But there are limitations simply because it's the nature of this whole virtual experience.
Wendy, if I can just add, and that's a really great questions. And several times I've heard about the conversation from parents about the social emotional well-being of the youngest of children. There's a great deal of research out there in the field of education, psychology, sociology as well, that talks about resiliency in young children and in children in general. I'd be happy to forward some articles, comments, and research that we can then maybe send out to parents or make available on our website. Something that parents could read into to alleviate maybe some of the concerns in reference to resiliency and how resilient our children are, and what are the factors that can benefit and support and add to that resiliency. I don't know if that's helpful or if it's more than we need right now.
I think that'd be great, Kaiser. We can definitely put it up on our reopening part of the website. We have a reading and resources section, and I think anything we can do to give parents more information is awesome. Our next question comes from an advocate for live online learning, and we have discussed everything on this question, so I'll just leave it up on here so everybody can see it. And the last question that we have not talked about, will teachers be required to record their live instruction from their classrooms where resources will be readily available to them?
As we mentioned, we're still in negotiations with the Teachers Association. Part of the MOU, the broader framed MOU, will likely address this. We also have to find out if the governor's current order precludes teachers from accessing the campus as well. That's one of those darker areas that we don't have feedback on. It is, just to be sort of transparent again, in the interest of the district to have teachers accessing their classrooms and delivering the instruction from their classrooms. But again, that's, you know, an effect of working conditions. We've identified in the current MOU that we just publicly shared the requirements. And, you know, I'm sure we'll continue to negotiate the effects of those requirements.
Can I add one thing that I think as a member of the committee, but also as a teacher at USC, you know, what we have spent the summer, we moved immediately to online, basically within like a 2-week notice. We just sort of moved everything. And at the time, we did live instruction, but we moved it directly, just sort of one-to-one, what we were teaching right over to online as best we could. And now we've spent the summer really with training about the best way to teach online. And I think it's important from a parent perspective to understand that moving exactly what teachers were teaching online in person to an online format isn't always the most successful way. So the idea of this sort of all synchronous learning, sitting in front of a monitor being lectured at like you would be in a classroom, isn't always the best way to go. And I think the teachers are very aware of it and have been working. And I think there's a lot of training to be done. But I think as a parent, you know, I see over and over like, oh, it's got to all be live. It's got to all be live. It's got to all be live. And I think definitely part of it has to be live. And that's really important. But I think there's another part where we have to figure out what best practices are online. And that isn't always just picking up your classroom and moving it to a screen.
I think that's really, really good. I think that's part of, you know, our teachers' professional expertise to redesign the lessons and be able, and that's why we were talking about multiple modalities in the MOU that we shared this morning, because there's, you know, it's not just it's not a 1-for-1. It's not apples to apples. It's a very different instructional delivery format, and there has to be some ability to nuance it and optimize it, and that requires creativity, and it's not just a you know, automatic transfer.
All right. Next comes from a PCY parent. Usually the school provides textbooks, journals, printouts, art materials, and other materials and resources to each student. How will the school deliver these resources to our kids with distance learning? And that's something the site principals are definitely working on right now. We had pickup of classroom materials and kind of cleaning the classrooms at the end of the school year that I think went fairly well. So the same process will be applied to kind of starting the school year. So that detail is being worked out by our site principals. And then next, just making sure, this one comes from Mandy Redfern, LCUSD staff member. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the 200 members of the La Cañada Teachers Association. We want to thank the LCUSD administrative team and school board for all that you're doing to ensure the safety of all members of our learning community. We have heard from various parents in our community over the last few weeks. Some have characterized the La Cañada teachers as lazy, overpaid, and unwilling to teach. Some parents have even organized a strike against the teachers. Not only is this disheartening, it is simply not true. I want to assure you today that your La Cañada teachers remain dedicated and committed to providing the best possible education to our students. Your La Cañada teachers and staff are committed to working together to provide rigorous academic experience that challenges and engages all of our learners. We are confident this can be achieved using a digital platform if needed. La Cañada teachers and staff are also committed to returning to campus as soon as it becomes safe to do so. We will find innovative ways to meet the needs of our students. While it may not look like what we have all come to know as education, the teaching and learning will prevail. In order to be our best as a teaching profession, we need the security of a working and learning environment that is safe. We are so appreciative of the leadership of our governor, the Los Angeles Department of Public Health, and our own school board and leadership team. Thank you for keeping the safety of our students and staff at the forefront of your decision today. We look forward to and remain committed to working together to do what is best for our entire learning community.
Thanks a lot, Mandy. It means a lot. I know that it is frustrating for me and others who are reading things on Facebook. I'm almost detaching from Facebook because I get so frustrated with the things I'm reading and how toxic it can become. And you know, a lot of our teachers are not only teaching our kids in the community, but they are friends of many of us in the community and have built relationships over many years. So it's really hard to hear them, teachers get hammered so much. And I think we all just realize we really share the same common objectives. And let's what I've said before, let's stay classy and be constructive in the way we deal with each other, and we'll end up in a good spot. But I don't want to damage these relationships that we've worked so hard to build over many years in our community. And let's take that into consideration as we think about the way forward, because this is a short-term thing. And our relationship with our teachers, this is a long-term thing, next 10, 20 years. So we've really got to be mindful of that and respectful of each other, our teachers, everybody. Let's just pick it up a notch and be more graceful, as some people have said in the past. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Joe. And I do want to say that this is a team effort. We're all trying to work together, all working together to ensure that the education and the social emotional needs of the children is met. And so let's move forward together.
I think I'd also add that from the secondary committee, we had a number of teachers providing excellent input, excellent ideas of trying to figure out the best way we can possibly get our kids involved in school, the after school ideas, everything else our teachers are very, very supportive of. So it is disheartening to hear criticism of the school. I think everyone's disappointed that we're not able to go back in person, but it's certainly not our teachers' fault. So I just echo what Joe says, and try and keep in mind that our teachers are a big part of our community, and we want to support them everywhere we can.
And I just, I want to thank our teachers. I want to thank our parents, thank our classified staff, but we're only going to move forward and be successful if we're doing so with all of the qualities that we've been talking about: flexibility, empathy, understanding, resilience. And to do that, you have to have trust, and you have to have faith, and you have to have a little bit of security that if you try something and it's, perhaps if it's unsuccessful, that there'll be understanding and support so that you can rethink and reapproach. And so we're all in this together, and it's only going to be successful if we have each other's backs.
Thank you. The next comment comes from Belinda Randolph, and I don't think this specific question was taken, so probably Dr. Yohori can help with this. How do we get teachers to follow IEP plans as written? Meaning, how do we prevent teachers from changing conditions in an IEP? For example, changing something from provide an appropriate alternative assessment to offer modifications to an existing assignment. This is especially important in the case where a teacher might suggest an IEP student only do 50% of the problems assigned, but the material is not attainable to the student, and thus the teacher is not following the IEP does two things. First, the student does not access the appropriate learning tool. Second, the student's mental is harmed by assigning an inappropriate task. This was an issue before the pandemic and was even more so during the pandemic.
So it's hard to address a specific situation with a specific student because accommodations may need to be adjusted a little bit in this particular situation, depending on an individual student's needs. I do think that it's important for everybody to be aware that the IEPs won't necessarily be able to be implemented minute to minute the way that they were originally designed, because they were designed for a different structure of schooling and a different length of school day and all of that. So the IEPs are going to be implemented to the maximum extent possible given this particular situation. Some accommodations may need to be added or adjusted because the virtual environment is so different from the in-person environment. But those adjustments should be done collaboratively between the case manager and the family with the team's input. And again, it's going to vary depending on the particular student and the difficulty that they're having.
Thank you. I think the next question you can help me with as well. This one comes from Jimmy Cam. LAUSD has a plan for paraprofessionals and their roles and responsibilities toward IEP families. LCUSD needs one as well. Is there one?
So as we've talked previously during this meeting, the paraprofessionals are going to be providing support to students and teachers. They'll be working under the direction of the teachers. A lot of what they'll be doing is going to be working in Zoom breakout rooms with the students.
Thank you. Next comes from Emily Woods, LCUSD parent. I would like LCUSD to submit for a waiver to allow for the proposed small groups to meet on campus. Will and Barger have spoken out in support of districts seeking a waiver for the elementary level. These proposed small groups for 7-12 are controlled, lower risk, and support student emotional needs. We are all starved for human connection. Please consider submitting a waiver. Thank you, Emily. That is definitely on our list. The next one comes from a concerned parent. Understanding we Oh, yes, please.
Can I just make a comment on that one? I think it's also important to know we don't yet know what the orders are going to be, so we don't even know if we're going to need a waiver. It may be that the order will permit small groups of fewer than 10 students who are outside, where the teachers and the students are voluntarily attending those groups. So I think that's a really big question that Wendy's can raise in the conversation about what exactly is prohibited, because we may be able to structure around whatever the rules are to allow the idea of a small group.
Thank you. Next, understanding we must begin virtually due to the governor's order, we would like to strongly encourage the board to mandate virtual learning and is conducted from school classrooms for elementary schools. This will enable students to receive the complete attention from their teachers during their scheduled time. Thank you. And as Wendy mentioned, that's part of negotiations. Next, from Belinda Randolph, the 617 MOU states a minimum of 1 grade per week will be issued. During the reopening committee, the discussion was focused on 2 grades per week. Why the change? How is 1 assignment graded per week for our students? What is the pedagogy that backs up this limited feedback? And is there a different number for our 504 and IEP students? As a member of the committee, I can answer this one, and then anybody else can jump in. We really looked at what types of assignments students were getting feedback on, and necessarily focusing all of those on grades wasn't the direction that we were interested in. We just really wanted to make sure students were getting feedback. So there may be other types of feedback that's given out, not necessarily just a grade. So I think that it's really helpful that students will know where they are in the class in terms of their grade, but there'll be other feedback on work throughout the week is what we're imagining.
And I think that you want to focus on quality, not necessarily quantity. We thought that the 1 grade would allow for, feedback. You also have to look at, at the 712 level, you're talking 180 students roughly on a teacher's roster. And, I think that there are trade-offs to make. You want to make the trade-offs for, quality instruction and connection and lesson design and all of that. And teachers being able to determine what meaningful assessments are, and really gearing so that the assessments are genuine, they're comprehensive, and that the feedback is manageable for teachers to deliver in a meaningful way.
I would also like to add that, some of you who have had children prior to the one you have, if you have younger children, that many teachers give a lot more than 1, 2, 3, or 4. We have teachers that have 7, 8 grades during the week because they grade so frequently, but this is the very minimum possible. And so we want to make sure that at least once a week, a child gets 1 formal grade and maybe lots of other comments, feedback, and such. So don't think that everybody is going to strive for 1 grade a week. There's going to be many, many teachers that give a lot more grades than that.
And then for IEP and 504 students, like I've said before, it depends on the individual student. I know that there's a tendency to want kind of a blanket statement for special education or a blanket statement for 504, but every student is different. They have different disabilities, and their disabilities may manifest in different ways. And so accommodations are made depending on each particular student's circumstances.
Thank you. This one was from Deborah Bell, and she was also requesting the ability to switch out of the virtual academy for elementary parents. So just one more comment noting that request. And Sharon Ray writes, I think her comment, again, I'm trying to paraphrase a little bit since we've been going for about 2.5 hours, but her comment is also about kind of improving online distance learning and instruction. And I know we've covered that one pretty clearly with the MOU and the previous comments. And just really advocating for us to be the best that we can be. So thank you, Sharon, for that comment. Tracy Louie writes, for me, it's more important to be able to make the choice between elementary virtual versus hybrid at a later time than having my child with the same teacher and group of students rather than the entire school year. Maybe it could be the 2020 calendar school year. And instead, I'm okay with my child building relationships with a new teacher, new group of students if it needs to be. The MOU does not give a full picture of what the virtual instruction will look like. There's no way of really knowing until they experience firsthand. And I think that's a really valid point. And as I mentioned earlier, with some of the work that the primary teachers are doing with me, we might have a way to build out kind of a clearer picture. So thank you for that comment. James Marchetti writes, is in a 100% remote learning environment, why is only 50% of normal instruction time being considered? Why isn't 100% of normal instruction being adopted? This seems to be a critical issue that isn't being discussed. And I think that one deals with, if this is TK6, we have the specials also programmed in for asynchronous. So that's part of why, and we're looking pretty closely with the kind of instructional minutes that would exist in normal classroom times, if I'm paraphrasing that correctly.
To Jamie's point, that's really valid. In a regular school day before, the pandemic, you would have, yes, an early bird, late bird schedule, or a, 8:10 to 2:50 day for 4th through 6th graders, but there would be pullouts, drama, music, art, Spanish, PE, all of those things. And so when you've just taken the AM PM schedule and distilled only English language arts, math, social studies, and science, the actual instructional time is equitable. It's very, there's a real strong similarity. And then the specials and all of those things that would have been pulled out in the instructional day will be offered asynchronously. So you're essentially having 100% normal instruction. It's just structured differently.
And I also think we need to remember that the schedule is built for the pivot, so we can get back to on campus. So we have to, there's so many competing needs and problems that we're trying to solve. So this is one of our solutions for that. The next comment from Grace Kung is just one more vote for having an undecided group for registration for our families. Just stating again how hard it is to make that choice for the 1-year commitment. And Kelsey Larson is also advocating for the waiver to find out if it's a way to bring in-person small group instruction back to the schools.
Thank you.
And Jamie Abrahamian is asking, what recourse do we as parents have if we aren't receiving what is laid out in the MOU? Also, is there a plan when teachers are having tech difficulties from home? Will they be required to teach from school? So Wendy, if you want to take the first one, I can take the middle one.
Sure. I mean, I think that we always like to keep things at the lowest level, or have that be where we start. So if you aren't experiencing the terms that are identified in the MOU as instructional requirements, please reach out to your teacher. Identify, what you don't think you're seeing, or have the conversation in a reasonable, approachful manner. If you start at that level and things progress and aren't working, then I would encourage you to access your principal to help you support getting those remedies. And we just keep moving things forward, but between the conversation with your teacher and the support of your principal, we should be able to have parents get the recourse and have delivered what's laid out in the MOU.
And then
the tech,
sorry, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes, so we worked pretty closely with all of our teachers pre-pandemic and during pandemic, and will continue to do so. So they have quite a few ways to reach out to us from home, and that also extends to our parents and students. So we want to make sure you guys know that you can get help during the day when you're at home trying to work, and all of that will be advertised heavily as school gets closer to starting. And then the last question we've already discussed. Belinda Randolph requests related to the town hall. Please plan to invite 504 parents and students to the educational town hall. Do not limit this only to IEP parents. And I'm sure that's the plan.
Just to clarify though, that 504s are a function of general education. So, I don't think that we will, exclude parents, but a 504 is not a special education function.
Thank you. And from Emily Woods, focusing 100% on online delivery of curriculum, I would like to see the following. Number one, an online deliverable that embeds all the links in one place, bouncing from teacher website to publisher website to YouTube to Google Classroom in a specific subject. Supplemental websites was very disjointing and confusing. A lot of go here, now here, then click here was very difficult for Gen Ed students. Forget anyone with executive functioning challenges, they were lost. I would like to see the teachers use something off the shelf that provides a roadmap and delivers the context / curriculum in a linear and logical manner, such as UC Scout, Apex, K-12. Utilizing this curriculum does not prevent the teachers from overlaying their own lesson plans or making their own, but it does allow for a much more organized delivery of information. It might even relieve some of the burden from teachers who are trying to move face-to-face lesson plans and deliverables to online distance learning deliverables. When we are about to move to a hybrid model, it supports the teachers by providing the content for the online students while the teachers are engaged with the in-person students. Therefore, the teachers are able to focus on the in-person face-to-face lessons and connecting with their students and not being spread so thin, trying to produce face-to-face lesson plans in addition to the recorded lesson plans, distance learning lesson plans. 2, teachers teaching from their empty classrooms. This eliminates any concerns about privacy. It provides the needed tech support and utilizes district technology. Additionally, teaching material would be readily available. Finally, when we can move to a hybrid or 100% in person, the classrooms are ready to welcome back the students because the teachers have been working out of them the entire time. 3, grades need to be entered in a classroom in a timely manner, no longer than 3 days after the due date prior to the next test or quiz, whichever comes first.
Thank you for the feedback. You know, we do have, the district does have a contract with Apex. I mean, part of those canned curricula, although they may be more streamlined, I don't think they're as robust as what our teachers create and provide. There may be some opportunity, however, to utilize those as a resource or a support for a teacher. Like we have all said all along, we want to work smarter, not necessarily harder. So appreciate the feedback there. We do have, as a district, an interest in teachers teaching virtually from their classrooms. But again, that's something that we will be working on with our larger scale MOU with the Teachers Association. And then we do have board policy and administrative regs that guide the timeliness of assessment. And so don't think it's as prescriptive as 3 days, but it is required that a grade is issued prior to the next similar type of assignment being administered. So there are some guidelines there which apply whether we're virtual or on campus.
Thank you. All right, we have about 15 more or so. From Mickey Waitman, has the district approved the teacher student support site paper? As previously discussed, this may assist teachers as well as students, particularly learners who need more assistance outside of scheduled time commitments.
Yes, we have asked paper to give us a quote for grades 4 through 12. So we're awaiting that quote. We've also initiated discussion at the table with LCTA regarding being able to use to bring this service on board. I think there's good reasons for the district to be able to articulate the need. The funding would be from the learning loss dollars. I think it's definitely not contracting out teacher work, but it's supporting teacher work. And I think it would also assist our families, especially as the curriculum becomes more difficult as we move up the grade levels. And so this is something that we are pursuing. It hasn't been finalized, but we do know it's an interest.
Thank you. This comes from Emily Woods, and I think this is talking back when we first opened about setting up the parameters and kind of the triggers for what coming back on campus would look like. So she writes, I agree with Andrew. It feels like we're trying to hit fog with the brick. Reopening is a moving target. The district needs to set some parameters regarding returning to in-person learning and pre-negotiate them with the bargaining unit. Thank you for working so diligently to make the best of a bad situation. I know everyone is taxed to their limits. Thank you for that, Emily. Aman Dylan writes, since any COVID vaccine will come out will be relatively untested for long-term side effects, is the district going to require students to have a vaccination prior to attending in-person school?
You know, and I think that that's something that we're going to have to see what the requirements are for reopening fully. And I think that's probably going to be under the purview of a board policy or an administrative reg. And I think we need more information to respond to that fully.
And I think the other comment on that is it's not necessarily that even if a vaccine's approved for adults, that it would be approved for children at the same time frame. So we may be in a situation where we have an approved vaccine for adults, but not for children. And that may complicate our decision making too.
Jenny Kazak, LCUSD staff member writes, hello, Wendy, you sent the teachers a survey asking for feedback on the schedules and MOU. Will our feedback be addressed here in public at the board meeting? I think teachers have a lot of questions and feedback that are important in regards to our working day. In addition, thank you, Kaiser, for acknowledging the great deal amount of time and need for continuing PD, teacher collaboration, grading feedback, and tech training and troubleshooting. The needs will be ongoing more now than ever. Teachers do not have much time built into the day or week for this.
We've, thank you, Jenny, for the comment. We have forwarded much of the comments from teachers. We're amassing all of that in writing to deliver to the governing board. It won't be addressed here, but it will be reviewed by the board, and we'll close the feedback loop with you at another time.
Thank you. Stacy Bolin writes, earlier in the meeting, a comment was made about during live instruction, a student could be considered absent if they missed it. While I understand the challenge of navigating the rules and agreements associated with recording such lessons, it's important to remember there could be many reasons a student misses a live session, including for those of us living in La Cañada, terrible internet service from Spectrum with unpredictable outages. Some things not are in control despite calling numerous times to report outages. Same goes for medical appointments, conflicts with parents having to work, commitments that are unable to support kids getting online exact times, especially if their AM, PM preference can't be supported. And I think, as always, we try to support students with any time they miss class, and this, that policy wouldn't change. We were just specifically discussing some of the challenges we're facing, but we'll do our best to mitigate them for sure. James Marchetti writes, regarding the 100% online elementary schedule, true full-time instruction with the entire class should seriously be considered as opposed to smaller AM, PM. If in-class instruction resumes this year, cohorts can be created for AM, PM, and in-person. And this one we did discuss a little bit earlier about trying to choose which challenges we're going to work on solving. And for that reason, we're keeping the AM, PM cohorts together in the hybrid model and, in the distance learning model. Aman Dylan writes, if a child is unable to access live instruction due to technical issues, what happens then? We're definitely coaching our teachers on flexibility. And as I mentioned in 2 comments ago, we'll do our best to help students get caught up. And if they are having technical issues related to anything that we can solve, we'll teach you how to ask for help. But if there are internet issues, of course, you could request a temporary hotspot from us. We did that last term to help parents who had outages. I delivered them to their houses. And if it's just temporary outages, of course, teachers will try to practice flexibility to help out.
And I think something to be said also is that, as we learn more and we develop more with this virtual learning, there might be a situation where, teachers have developed more cohesive pacing guides. And maybe a teacher is delivering a lesson live where a colleague is delivering it via Screencastify or something that's recorded. And as we begin to more and more curate these lessons and lesson designs, there wouldn't be anything that would preclude, the development of, I'm teaching my live lesson, but a grade level colleague has it in a Screencastify and shares it so that I can push it out to students who maybe missed the live presentation or need some reinforcement with a recorded lesson. So, I think that the more that teachers given the opportunity to talk and to plan together, the better off we'll be able to deliver on those needs that are identified here.
Thank you. Octavia thus writes, how will an elementary student be held accountable for the special courses? Will these be mandatory?
Working with the principals on that, for PE, I mean, the minutes have been, the minute requirements have been waived, but I think it's still important for our kids to be accessing the PE curriculum, and we would want to be issuing grades per the report card for that. For other special courses, they do tend to be graded, but if they're being delivered asynchronously, there are going to need to be allowances made for when the courses are accessed, what the deliverables are in terms of assessment and all of those things. So it's going to be important for us to develop the syllabi, the course expectations, and that so that the special teachers are communicating how the work will be assessed and how the grades will be assigned.
Thank you. A parent writes, I always thought block schedule was to accommodate labs for science classes. Is it really necessary to have blocks days when students aren't doing lab experiments? And I can help a little bit with this when there are a variety of things teachers do on the block days. And specifically, we thought with the reopening committee, speaking with our teachers, there's a lot of flexibility with that time to do more small group lessons, other experiences, that having that block of time could be even more flexible for the teacher and how they design the experience. So while it is definitely for science, it also supported essay writing for English or group projects. And we're looking at really creative ways to use that time during the block schedule with the virtual learning.
And I know our secondary committee had a great deal of discussion about whether block is beneficial if you're online, and our educators filled in a lot of the information. But I know, Wendy, the two thoughts emerged. One was a concept of starting out the year for a couple of weeks without block, like we often do. And the other question was polling the teachers to see what their thoughts were on block days. Did we get feedback on that?
Sorry, Dan, I think some of that feedback will be presented to the board in written form from the teacher survey. But we had talked about having as normal practice as possible, and block doesn't typically start until 2 to 3 weeks in, and so that would be communicated from the principals, Dr. Gold and Mr. Cartnell. The other thing is that in our secondary reopening committees, there was a lot of robust discussion about the benefits in block schedule with breakout room activities, with project-based learning, game-based learning, digital apps, Socratic seminar, a lot of great ideas from the teachers themselves about how they could utilize best practices and really make a full instructional advantage with the block scheduling.
And we also talked about how we do have flexibility with this schedule. So we could try something out for a quarter and decide we want more block or less block. So that was one of the other considerations we had.
Yeah,
so thank you for that
Jen.
comment. Then this next parent's commenting on an idea for the schedule for the high school. I think you'd be better off with 4 70-minute classes a day, rotating through the 6 periods. For example, Monday is periods 1 through 4, Tuesday is 4 through 6, and 1, 2, Wednesdays 3, 6, and so on through the semester. Then you could go back to in-person instruction with half the students in the classroom. You do like you're doing the elementary schools with AM, PM students, each doing 35 minutes. Thank you for that suggestion. We're definitely still looking at schedules for the hybrid component. And this next question asks specifically from Anonymous about our guest panelists, Caroline Anderson and Josh Epstein, about being fair. And just for transparency, all committee members were asked if they wanted to join today's call, and Josh and Caroline volunteered. So thank you both for being here.
I'm very appreciative for their input. We did ask every committee member whether they would like to help present to give insights, not only from the teacher perspective, but from the parent perspective, to round out the conversation with the board. And so no one's opinion is necessarily more important. It's just, this is a collaborative effort, and we appreciate the committee members being willing to share out in this fashion.
Yep. Thank you, Josh and Caroline as well.
All right, about 5 more comments. This one comes from Stacy Boland. The LCHS Engineering Club went above and beyond this summer, offering virtual courses on CAD and programming to elementary school age students. The patience and professionalism of those involved was amazing. I want to personally thank them for their efforts and ask the school board administration consider offering any support it can and in support of their efforts. I would love to see these types of things continue, as it offers a way for more senior students to hone those skills while getting younger students excited to learn something new based on interest versus requirement. Is there a way to involve student group volunteers to add meaningful content, even if opportunities are only occasional, to our virtual academic lives at the elementary school level? And yeah, thank you for this comment. I know we had high school students tutoring during spring term, and that the principals at the elementary site help oversee. So if any students are out there listening and you have ideas of how you can contribute, please reach out to one of your principals and we'll try to facilitate. I know my student tech team, they have 4 webinars scheduled for the next 2 weeks to do student training. So there are a lot of ways students are kind of stepping up and finding ways to creatively help out.
Yeah, and
One more.
Just back to that.
Please.
Sorry, back to that one. This ties in. Thank you, Stacy, for your comment. I think this ties into us looking for these opportunities for club and virtual and all that. And this was, I saw a lot of emails and posts about this one going out. So there's got a lot of traction and visibility. Maybe it's a model we can follow for other clubs and get more people involved. So pretty cool stuff.
The other thing too is that these small group experiences for like the engineering club and things like that make themselves totally appropriate for those after school kids coming together based upon their interests, based upon their connections with teachers and clubs and small groups. So I just feel like the work that they did was phenomenal, but we've designed a schedule that really allows that to flourish.
Oh, and I don't want to miss a shout out to the Girls Who Code group at the high school. They've done some other really interesting work with our elementary school students. So thank you to them as well. Our next comment is just one more vote for the undecided category for pre-registration. So just really reiterating that the time commitment feels daunting for the elementary school online learning choice. And so asking to be able to reassess after the semester or end of 2020 for the virtual learning. I think we talked about kind of the scheduling challenges related to that, but definitely taking it under advisement. An LCUSD parent writes, to provide context for the importance of special instruction, what percentage of the district students fall into this category, IEPs, 504s, et cetera?
So at the moment, it looks like we've got 425 students in special education in our system, which I don't know what our total population is at the moment, but I think that equates to roughly 10 or 11%.
Our total population is about 4,100.
Okay, so 425 are under special education. 504s, I don't have the specific numbers, but I think that the last time I looked, it was roughly 3%.
Thank you. Another parent writes about the instructional time that we're committing to with this schedule with the 3 hours. And so just reiterating that point that a couple other comments said, asking for full day synchronous instead of half load. And then we did specifically talk about the specials and the other things that do happen during the day there.
The other thing too, that, you know, one of the things with doing the AM PM, we've really sort of upped the game on class sizes. You know, if you've got 30 sixth graders, I think it's harder to manage that live instruction and that Zoom. And so by going into AM PM, you're now looking at anywhere from, you know, 14 or 15 students that you're dealing with. The instruction's more personal. You know, the delivery with a synchronous environment is going to be more effective. And so I know that we've made a good case for that, the equitable nature of the 3 hours focused on English language arts, math, social studies, and science, but also I think the manageability and the differentiation and the personalization that we're offering with the reduced ratios is something that's pretty powerful and needs to be considered as a benefit.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Last few, those who register for the 100% online academy will return to campus once the county enters stage 3. And I think you answered yes on this earlier.
There might be a case where there's a student with a medical diagnosis or a medical exemption, but typically for stage 3, we would plan on all students returning.
Thank you. And one more vote for limiting the option for the virtual learning and making it first semester. So just really asking for the schedule to be adjusted to not have to decide for the whole year. And the last comment, it seems like it was a repeat of earlier, and this one was about providing the materials, and the principals will be working on that and communicating that to their families.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that was worthwhile getting through some very well-articulated and the time invested from the public in terms of those comments. And I think it's going to only help us inform our go forward actions. Thank you very much, as always. The virtual environment has afforded a lot of extra feedback, and hopefully we're able to use it quite effectively. So thank you from everybody out there, for everybody out there. Okay, so we need to take some action here officially, right, Wendy? So I don't know if there's any more discussion before we do that, but really I don't know if I want to break into two. You want us to have a motion to approve the schedules, elementary and the 7 to 12, as we know they exist right now. And unless there's any more discussion, we can move into those motions. I don't know if you want to make it 2 motions or 1 motion to approve both together. It doesn't make a difference to me.
I don't know if the board feels differently about the elementary and secondary schedules. If you want to take them one at a time, that would be fine, or you could do them together. We don't have articulated, and we've been very transparent with that. We don't have articulated a hybrid model for the secondary. We have the opportunity to potentially do a hybrid model with the schedule that we're forwarding, but it would mean virtual students on campus in pure cohorts accessing the curriculum on campus, but virtually. And then the opportunity for social, emotional learning and instruction and connection and school culture all happening in the small groups after school. But we haven't forwarded that to you, and the committee hasn't landed on its recommendation yet.
Well, then would it make sense that we actually are the motions we're approving, even though we know we built elementary, for instance, to go back and forth, but we don't have the upper grades finished yet, what that might look like, that because we know for the foreseeable future, we're in the online environment, that we're really just approving the online schedules at this point, and then we can come back in a subsequent meeting and ratify elementary and 7-12 together, or knowing we have elementary. Anybody have
I don't think
thoughts on
there's a better, I don't think, having examined this for the last, 6 to 8 weeks and gone through everything that we could think of, I don't think there's a better hybrid model for the elementary. So I think that you're really looking at virtual and hybrid until stage 3 with that recommended schedule. Secondary is different. You have a recommended virtual schedule, and you don't have a recommendation yet for the hybrid.
So then I think it would make sense then to split them up. And if you did want to go the route of elementary, it's under the assumptions that that's both built together, and that you'd be proving what we know today for the upper. And that we come back in that mode to when we have more information, work through the committees and such, that we can recommend the hybrid or stage 3 version. Is everybody okay with that? If we break into 2?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. I think the only thing we would need to tweak on that is what we're going to be asking the parents to do by Sunday. And are we going to be asking elementary parents to commit to one or the other? And what about 7 through 12? And I know we have to move forward with scheduling and classroom formation and all that. So I'm not sure if there's a way to do both.
I'm not sure why we're splitting it up, and our agenda talks about both. I know we have the opportunity to make tweaks, but if we're moving and we have an agenda item, it is asking for the reopening. I just want to clarify the directions that we are to give and the vote we are to take. Approve the recommended schedules. It's approve the recommended schedules and the memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, the memorandum of understanding was for the board to share out publicly. The board is invested with, I have the authority to sign off on the memorandum. So you could vote to, I don't endorse it, but it's already official. And then with regard to the schedules, the key board policy feature is that the board sets the begin and end time of the school day. I think that in this case, with these unprecedented circumstances, that adopting the schedules would be important. You have my recommendation that the elementary schedule serves as our hybrid model and our virtual model. So, that might be just more streamlined, voting on it separately as both, and then voting on the high school schedule as our virtual schedule, with pending a recommendation from the committee on the hybrid schedule.
That's where I'm at. I just don't think they're consistent. They're parallel and consistent. So I think I'd like to break them apart if there's no major object. I think we get to the same end, right? Which we're approving the schedules we know about. But I think administratively, I think keeping them separate is helpful. So does anybody have a motion if we want to go that way to approving the virtual, online, and hybrid models, and with any of the caveat that Dan's been bringing up around deadlines for parents, if it needs to include that?
I would ask a couple of things. I think that Dan's point is important. I don't think that I'm not in the office, and so I don't have the bandwidth to do to work with staff to put forward something. So maybe we vote, or maybe you give direction to staff to extend the Sunday deadline. I don't think we would extend it by a lot, but I think the people who are undecided could be sort of waiting to sort of hear what the recommendation is, and then be able to pre-register rather quickly. Let's say maybe we extend it to Wednesday, the 29th. Still means that within a week after the 29th, we could get out the class rosters and the AM PM schedules, giving families still, just 2+ weeks. But I think that, I don't know, I mean, unless Anna East and Ed Services wants to take over the, I don't know, you have to, it depends on how specific the direction is that you want to give us. Otherwise, I would just say that there's a postponement of the 27th to be determined based on, cabinet work that would happen pretty quickly towards the end of the week.
I'm not sure why we're extending the deadline.
I think you've heard pretty clearly that some families don't know what to do. And so you don't have my recommendation was that we keep the deadline. Yeah. And that families decide whether they want to be in for the year or not.
I appreciate, I'm sorry, Wendy, I appreciate that there is a concern and that families are having a hard time deciding, but I think we've provided a great deal of detail. Are we looking for more? I just want to make sure that we're clear. We keep moving targets and dates, and I just want to be consistent and stay on schedule. Let's get some decisions made and let's move forward so that we can support everyone that's moving into the next 3.5 weeks as we come back to school. So.
And I think it would help if we kind of distinguish the 7 through 12 from the elementary, because I think we've painted a pretty good picture of the elementary. I guess the only question there is we've had some feedback from parents that they'd like to opt out somewhere during the year instead of committing for the whole year. And I think that's a decision for the district, Wendy and her staff to make. As far as the secondary, my only concern is that we really haven't, as a secondary committee, come up with a workable plan as to what stage 2 looks like. I like the one that Wendy's suggesting today, and maybe that's what we'll land on. But it just seems like it's hard for parents to make a choice, and they don't know what that looks like.
So can we move forward with at least identifying and approving the schedule for the elementary?
I'm fine with that.
Keeping the dates as is. How's everyone on the board feel?
I mean, you want to keep the July 26th deadline, Kaiser, for the elementary?
I'm thinking, unless I'm completely off. Someone help me here.
But if my understanding is if no one does anything. Like they don't declare for the virtual academy. They by default then are moving into the hybrid when we kick back in, right? So there's not a mechanism. If people forgot to sign up and they missed the deadline, there's no catching up. We'll assume that that was their decision, right?
Right. I mean,
Correct.
one of the next steps, I mean, I'm going to be writing an email. It's going to remind families to pre-register. It's going to say, if you pre-register, you're opting in for 100% virtual for the entire school year. And it's going to articulate what the MOU is presenting regarding the online learning experience. So that's going to happen. The question is, if you have those families who are not sure what they want to do, does the board want to give direction as to not making it 100% of the school year? Or if you want to have an undecided box where we create a class of, or a cohort or a class of undecided, and maybe that undecided, once we get through it, splits into AM and PM. AM comes back, PM stays virtual. I mean, I don't,
I think
I don't know how many permutations you can put
Right.
on this and have it be manageable.
I think we have to allow, since it's such a moving target with the community and our county and the changes that we're seeing, I think we have to make one decision and then come back and allow the district administration to kind of work through some of the nuances, maintain the committee and the feedback from the parents and the teachers and the board members that are on the committee. Is that possible to work through?
Well, I know we've committed, Wendy, that we will commit to assess and revise as we go. We're a smaller district, and because of that, we have some flexibility that if we get feedback at certain points along the way, we might make some changes. But we have to go out with a model, right? We have to go out with what we know and then just commit to through an iterative process, tweak where we can, right? And that could be in so many different dimensions of what we execute.
Well, there's a lot of thinking to do. I mean, if the board wants it to be the hybrid model, I mean, if you want to allow, if you don't want to make it for the entire school year, it would seem then you would want to potentially make it for the first 2 trimesters, which would put you at roughly a March date, and whereby a family could reassess. If you're going to allow people to reassess, there's going to have to be requirements. You may not get the teacher that you've been with virtually. You may not get the same class that you've been with virtually. If you're going to opt into coming back on campus and that becomes an option, you may not be able to come back to your home school for that year. So, if you want that flexibility, there's also, if I want to be 100% virtual, but then have the opportunity to opt back in, what you're going to lose is some of the consistency that you would have had if you remained in the virtual environment. If people know that, then we can probably work with it.
Wendy, can I ask, how do you feel about extending the deadline? Do you think that's a good idea?
I mean, if with this deadline, our goal was to get out to families by the 31st, the 3rd at the latest, who their teacher was going to be and if it was going to be an AM PM schedule. That was then going to give families roughly 2 weeks to set up their childcare, to identify their pods, if that's what they're going to do. That gives them 2 weeks of planning time. If you push the deadline beyond the 26th, we're going to have to push the communication to families about class assignments and teacher assignments and AM and PM assignments past the, potentially the 3rd.
Can I just say, I don't
sensitive,
think
Wendy. Go ahead, Andrew.
The date of the deadline seems not worth moving in my estimation. Even the comments we heard from parents today was not about having a couple extra days to think about it. It was like having a trimester's worth of experience to decide if it made sense for them. So I don't know if there's any new information that's going to appear between Sunday and Wednesday. And so I'm not yet hearing the wisdom behind moving the deadline. I do understand why people want flexibility. I certainly get that, but I think it's been pretty well articulated by Wendy today at what cost that will come. I'm increasingly of the mind that it doesn't make sense for the board right here, right now, to create a whole new logistical challenge that will throw all the planning back into the spinner on the fly. But I also understand that the idea of revisiting some sort of flexible option in the future may be something that seems more feasible months from now, once we have greater clarity on what phase 2 will look like or new guidance from the state. So I guess I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but my inclination is to stick with the deadline, to ask parents to understand that there are major trade-offs here. Everyone is making them. There's a lot of uncertainty here. We're all working in that. And the ask is that you make the commitment for the year. But Wendy and the board and the district understand that there is a desire to potentially revisit at another date. And so while that's no commitment that you'll be able to do so, it is a commitment that we will continue to evaluate options to do so. But we're asking you now, by that deadline, to tell us what your intention is for the year.
That's sound logic, Andrew.
That's elementary you're talking about, right, Andrew?
Elementary, for elementary, yeah.
Thank you.
And I will piggyback onto Andrew's comments, wise comments, and suggest that we move forward. And I move that we go ahead and vote on or give recommendation to the elementary schedule with the dates as scheduled, and ask the district to follow up and reach out to parents who may not have connected, and maybe take those first 2 days, the 27th and the 28th of July, to reach out to parents that haven't communicated back at all and say, hey, can we make a decision, or make an attempt to reach out and to communicate, so that we can solidify schedules and give parents as much time as possible, with the understanding that we're going to come back and revisit this at a future board meeting to see how we're doing, how it's experiencing, and then what is it going to look like when the county goes back and we ultimately move to phase 3.
So I hear a motion emerging here, but I have one clarification for Wendy. Wendy, you're technically on vacation this week, and you've already spent 4 hours today. And was there a benefit built into your suggestion and you and your staff of moving that date? Because maybe you wanted to communicate an email out to families articulating exactly what they're deciding. If you want to stick with the current date, then I think we support that with the motion.
You know, Jamie and I had already talked, and I was, we were planning on doing within the next 24 hours, an email to families, clarifying some of the MOU terms, providing an infographic to make it very, very simple. We know the families are stressed, but they're not, many aren't reading emails, doing a close read of emails. So trying to just really streamline the email content, reminding people that they were asking for them to pre-register. That can all be handled within the next 24 hours or so. Before close of business on Wednesday, that email will go out. So it wasn't a request of mine unless it was board direction to extend the deadline.
Well, I go back to the sound logic from Andrew at this point, and we can in your email, we can talk about openness to revisit as the situation changes and evolves, like we've always done in everything we do. So do you want to, Keitzer, I know you're off screen, but I assume you're still there. You warned us you might have some internet. There you go.
I'm just having issues with Southern California Edison out here, and I'm just trying to maintain hotspots and Wi-Fi just so I stay online. So forgive me if I keep going back and forth. I'm here.
Okay, so why don't we try to anchor off your motion? Why don't we, and if there's any more discussion, this is purely an elementary motion at this point for the elementary model, right? So if you want to frame it one more time, and then we'll see if we have a second.
I want to move that we go ahead and approve the beginning and closing of the schedules, or approve and recommend to the district they move forward with working families to ensure that we have the schedules set forth, to develop schedules, to develop cohorts, keep the dates as is, and then revisit in future board meetings to see how things are going, so that we can make adjustments as the county is adjusting.
Okay.
Can you clarify, are you talking about just the elementaries, or are you talking about the secondary also now?
PK through 6th grade.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thanks.
You're off, Joe.
Then all in favor with show of hands, because I can see everybody, with approving of the motion from Keitzer. Okay, that's all of us. All right, we got elementary squared away. Now we want to move to what we want to put forward as a motion to handle 7 through 12, knowing that we have not come up with a hybrid, a stage 2. It's opening what we know right now for online.
And Joe, I have a question on that. As to the elementary, I understand that there's great need to establish the classes, get the schedule set, let the parents know what classes they're in, and start like filtering the kids into each class and defining each class. At the 7 through 12, is there also that same desire to filter kids based on whether they're opting into the online or not? I mean, are the classes going to be formed that way? Because we don't have a natural pivot anyway.
No, I mean, sorry. The 712 was more of an interest survey. The master schedule, will be built. There's not going to be, people aren't going to be cohorted with the teacher who is committing to remain virtual all year. It's too complicated. So what we were looking at is when we pivoted to on-campus instruction, what would be the impacts for class sizes, what would be the impacts for being able to keep cohorts potentially pure, what would be the need for recorded lessons because kids weren't going to be accessing coming back on campus. So it was more just of a future planning piece, not much as much a logistical piece for opening the school year.
So does someone want to put forward a motion that complies with the intention behind, with what Wendy needs for her and her staff to get moving forward to move ahead with the setting up of school for 7 through 12?
Well, I'd move that we adopt the schedule as presented by Wendy and is directed by the principals as to when they want to start the block day for the opening of school.
A second.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. All right, then let's see if we can move forward. Then all in favor of Dan's motion, Andrew's second. Okay. Very important that we got through this today. Thank you very much. And I think we're setting the table for then staff to work through all the specifics, and we've delegated certain components to them, and especially as you work through your broader MOU. And we'll react, Wendy, if you need us to come back together in a special or some other type of direction based on what the situation and how it unfolds. But we're here to support you.
Thank you. And what I want to just do is articulate in a sort of enumerated fashion what I see as the next steps. We've committed to reviewing the TKK schedule and articulating that. In terms of your motion, it maintains the same start and end time. So your motion can stand. But we do, it's incumbent upon the teachers forwarded a recommendation. So we want to look at that and respond. And then we want to create a 50% loading capacity, sort of an A-B schedule for 7-12 that allows a virtual option for families. And so that will be taken to committee to be brought back to you with a recommendation. We want to engage in sort of some marketing over the next 24 hours that clearly articulates to families what the virtual learning experience is, how it will be, how it's been delineated through the instructional requirements, and reminding families that they need to pre-register for 100% year-long virtual experience by Sunday, but articulating also to families that that is the current iteration of the plan, and that the board and district staff have an interest that as things change, that commitment for a year-long experience could be shortened for a family if we were able to do so. And it was in the interest of families. We also need to, as soon as possible after Sunday's pre-registration closes, to load the elementary classes, determine the AM, PM, and communicate that to families so that they have a solid 2 weeks of planning time for childcare. What we heard today about their interest in creating pods, going forward with things like that. We need to work with the high school administration to create a structure around the La Cañada High School 7-12 afternoon sessions, sharing that with teachers and sharing that with families. We also want to find out more about the waiver opportunities and see what that allows for with regards to the on-campus presence for students and what the governor's requirements are. I have an interest in exploring, and this will probably largely happen with the MOU at the table, but are there any daycare options that we can consider for LCUSD staff? And then we also have the whole contract with paper as a tutorial service that we would potentially be offering to families 7-12. So those are sort of the new marching orders now that we have our virtual opening schedules established. And I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, anything that people want to add to that? Dan?
Can I make a request that in your email, you also clarify what you want from 7 through 12 parents? Are you looking still for a commitment to being online, or are you looking more for their preferences type of thing? Is it a commitment, or is it just sort of your polling kind of thought?
Or tell them that you don't expect anything, that you're going to move forward. Why? But I think to Dan's point, because we talked so much about registering, they might think they missed something unless you're very clear. You don't have to do anything or give us your opinion, but be clear, because I think some people might be confused that they didn't declare or missed a message to declare a certain path.
Okay.
Brent.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, I think Andrew brought up a great point about communicating the changes to the remote learning as opposed to last spring. And I know you're going to do that, Wendy, but I really support that. I think that'll really be important for the parents to know the differences that we'll have compared to last spring.
We saw a preliminary view of the marketing materials, Brent. It looked pretty strong, and they're going to further, tighten those down. But already out of the gate, the packaging up kind of sell story in terms of what we're bringing to the table this time around. But they look pretty good.
And there'll obviously be an email that comes out before the close of business tomorrow that identifies all of the terms of the MOU to help people make a decision with the pre-registration. But I also know that there's a strong interest in us just continuing to communicate, to market, to share out features. And so that'll be an ongoing effort at communication, and it won't end with just the communication that comes out over the next 24 hours.
Okay.
Wendy, would you feel more comfortable if we endorsed the MOU or explicitly gave you authority to negotiate the MOU as you see fit? Does that give you more flexibility either way?
I think an endorsement might, I don't know. I mean, it's the superintendent has always had the authority to negotiate the MOUs. And then you also passed the resolution last spring that during the COVID time that even expanded my authority to act. But I think that it's a strong community message. If there was a vote to endorse or support, or, I don't know, bless the MOU, I don't know. I think that's also, the interest of the board. I mean, if you are pleased with the MOU and you want to sort of just, publicly share with the community that you feel like it will be a radical, move forward, or a strong move forward in our ability to deliver quality distance instruction, then I think that benefits, that has some merit.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it says that we're very serious about that the online experience is going to be of a certain quality, and it's going to be a La Cañada standard for the quality of it, and that there's a lot of good ideas that have gone into it of what we want to see online, and there's some excellent thoughts that are there. So I like the idea of endorsing it, just to sort of reiterate that it's very important to us that we do online the right way, and so I'd make a motion to endorse the MOU.
I'm fine with that. My only concern is, I know you have another round of MOU discussion, so are we going to endorse it twice or 2 iterations of it? But I'm comfortable giving some horsepower and some validation and credibility to it. If you'd like us to make a resolution or a motion in either form or fashion, I'm fine.
I think Dan has made the motion, and I think Andrew was going to second.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so endorsed.
And then one other housekeeping, I would feel more comfortable if we explicitly once again gave Wendy the authority to negotiate the MOU as necessary, and give her whatever powers are necessary to negotiate the MOU so she can continue moving forward. I think we did that last year, but it'd be nice to just reiterate that.
I'm fine with that.
Do that.
You want to put a motion out?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brent. All in favor of giving some additional authority to Wendy on the next round of MOUs?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. In Wendy we trust. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Does that bring to a close number 4 on the agenda? I know, Jamie, you wanted to show, I know you quickly had it on screen. If you want real quick, you want to bring that back up and show the marketing materials related to, it may not be the final form, but here's a draft version.
Yes, and thank you to our reopening committee members who volunteered to help me with this. So it takes some of the MOU language and just puts it in a nice package for our parents. So what we were trying to distinguish between the virtual kind of academy experience versus our launch that we're going to have with everybody being online. So we just wanted to articulate what's happening at each of the school sites. So this will be fine tuning in the next few hours and getting it ready to release to families. So any feedback or comments from the board would be appreciated. One thing I did kind of take the liberty to add that we heard from just emails that I was getting over the last few days, that this is just a temporary, is the date for reassessment. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about that today of when we would do that. So if there was any clarity about how long this would go or what the triggers would be, I think that'd be something to add on there. I know some other school districts have set like a early October, like they're virtual until October and they're reassessing. So I don't know if that's something that's possible or if we just leave that off the flyer, but something I was thinking about.
Jamie, what's the significance of October 11th?
It's the end of the first quarter for the high school.
The other thing, Jamie, is that I think that there's some fine tuning on clarity regarding reassessment for the kids in the virtual academy who were sort of asking them to commit for the whole year with the idea that we would, try to accommodate those who wanted to come back on campus. So, maybe just looking at that just a little bit. I think we want to be flexible, but that seems to imply a guarantee of flexibility by October 9th.
Well, that again, there's two tracks, right? There's the everybody's coming back virtual, but they want on campus. And then this one is the virtual academy. So as this one right now is built, it says this is a full year online program. Okay. I could add an asterisk there that says pending reassessment based on COVID conditions.
I was thinking the same thing. Just a quick asterisk to that at the bottom.
Yeah.
The board is committed to look at options to where that might evolve.
Yeah, I can put an asterisk and then put a notation in the FAQ just so that it's in a couple places to help people.
And then I'll try to put it in the narrative.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think we should talk for a moment. I know we've been going for a long time and it's been a long day, but I do think that we should talk for a moment about the idea of whether we want to have an October 11th. The advantage of having a certain date out there at a certain point is to give some clarity to parents that they know it will be this way. But it also seems to me our educators could prepare their education and lesson plans better if they knew that we're going to be staying in this model at least through October 11th. The flip side of that, of course, is we'd like to be able to pivot as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So I don't know what the board thinks on that, whether the interest in making sure that we have continuity and educators preparing their plans and parents making their decisions and plans, or whether we want to be able to keep the idea of pivoting quicker.
I like where you're headed on that, Dan, because I know I've heard from teachers that at least some runway in front that they could plan against is helpful. And then you carry that over to parents. I know there's an aspiration, though. There's a group of parents and families that would love to get back absolutely as soon as possible when that 14-day, but we haven't even agreed upon the triggers just yet. So I guess you weigh those things, that given the continuity versus taking away flexibility, and where do we want to end up?
I think we need to just keep it open-ended at this point. We have 2 school board meetings that are scheduled. I was just looking after August 11th, prior to that, our October 11th date. So I think if we just keep it open-ended, saying to be revisited, we have opportunities during those school board meetings to be able to ask the district for information and to assess as we move forward.
Andrew, Brent, thoughts?
I think that's fine. I mean, I think short of there being a recommendation from Wendy today about what that is, I think the focus has got to be right now on getting this open as well as possible virtually, and we can revisit the questions separately, what those triggers will be. Again, unless Wendy has some framework she wants us to adopt now.
No, I think that we need more information. I think we need information about the waivers. I think we need information about, you know, sort of the nuances of what the governor announced on Friday. I think in order to make an informed decision about the incremental phases by which we're going to assess, we need just a you know, more details on what those trigger points could be.
I'm fine with that and waiting to revisit. As Kaiser points out, we have other meetings. I think that would be good.
Dan, you okay with that for now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I see both
Okay.
sides of that. I see the advantage of, you know, certainty, but I also see the need, because we have no idea where we're going with all this, that I just don't know which, if I were an educator, I think I would prefer to plan out my first quarter with certainty of what every week is looking like. And I think that might lead us to better prepared online experience by having educators know that they're going to be in that mode for the first quarter. But I also understand the interest in pivoting.
Yeah, because then that gives back to your, you know, your desire to have the incremental approach, right? That we can move with more information as we see fit. So I can see both sides. So.
And I'm also really comfortable trying to get some of these details, and then, you know, even potentially calling another special where
Right.
we have an incremental recommendation for, you know, the length of the first assessment period.
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of the board that if you need a special from us, then we'll move and flexes to keep you moving. No problem.
Thank you.
And also, along those same lines, it would be nice if we also could just consider the feedback from our teachers. If our teachers, and now we're talking 7 through 12 mostly, if they would rather plan out the first quarter as one cohesive unit, knowing that it's all online, I would be in favor of that if our educators thought that would lead to a better product.
And we'll share that survey feedback with you over the course of, you know, the next day or so, so that you can just sort of see what the teachers' concerns or interests were with relation to the schedules and the MOU.
Thank you.
And the only thing then to close this item off would be just keep us informed, Wendy, on the special education town hall, so we can make sure we assign. I heard Brent and Keizer possibly to attend, but we'll figure that out. I'll sign them based on when you give me the date and the objectives of the town hall, and then I'll pull the team.
I think Derek will probably within the next 24 hours sort of land on a date. We had been talking about Thursday, potentially July 30th. It'll probably be next week toward the end of the week, but we just have to get, you know, identify all the parties who need to be involved and float the dates and times.
Perfect. Okay. I think we're ready to close off item 4. Great work in a short period of time. A lot has changed. Very dynamic environment the last few days, and you guys, your team has risen to the occasion. So thanks for helping us set the table for the community.
Thank you.
All righty. Let's move into agenda item 5, which is about second read items. And we had a board policy that you brought last meeting, and this one's back. I think Anais is covering this one for us. And this was board policy 5141.52 related to suicide prevention.
Yes, thank you. So we went over the recommended changes at the last meeting for a first read, and it's pretty much just transferring and adding and preserving all the services that would be available to our elementary age students. As in the past, it was only available at the 7-12 level, but due to changes in the law and requirements and the increase in mental health problems like our younger students are facing at younger and younger ages, we would like to have these services available at the elementary level. So I asked the board to approve our revisions as suggested so we can start implementing it in the new year.
Any discussion or want to go to a motion? So I think we talked about last time was spot on. We need to pull this focus, you know, more and more cases where elementary kids, especially in right now, what's happening with online and people feeling isolated, things can happen. Perfect timing for us to be focused on this. Any comments before we maybe make a move to put a motion in place? Okay, well then do I have a motion to approve the changes from the team for BP 5141.52?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, you did? Okay, thanks. All right, all in favor? Okay, thanks, Anais.
Thank you.
Okay, and I believe that puts us to consent agenda, right? Okay, for 6, do I have a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. All in favor to approve consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Then I think we're almost ready to conclude, but I will insert back in communications again. Anybody have anything we're almost at the end here. Any comments from the team, staff or board? I'll start with Brent.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Keitzer?
Huge thank you to everybody.
Andrew?
Just thank you.
Dan?
I have a list of 2 pages of materials that I wanted to, just kidding. Thank you all for all your hard work. Enjoy your vacation, Wendy. Thank you for all your staff for your excellent work. Thank you for the parents and the teachers who have been involved in the educating the committees. You guys have done a remarkable job in a very short period of time. So thank you all.
Yeah, and I echo what my peers have said. Thank you to everybody. Appreciate it. Cabinet, anything on communications? Jamie?
Thanks. I just want to remind everybody to check out our website to follow along for parent trainings and student trainings. So keep checking there for information on that.
Anais?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mark?
All good, thanks.
Wendy?
I just want to, I know we've sort of done a thank fest, but teachers have been amazing in terms of working with us. I'm appreciative to LCTA for the MOU. I'm appreciative to our parents. I know that we're asking a lot and we're trying to equally be as responsive as possible. It's not easy, but we sure are overwhelmed and appreciative of their responsiveness, and we'll work really, really hard to make sure that the education we provide to their children is world-class and that we keep them moving along in step with us. Board, I'm appreciative to you for your leadership and your support and just the forward-thinking nature of all the work that you do. And I'm just very grateful to our administrative team who's working really tirelessly. And I think that, if anybody's going to do it right, I think it's going to be us. We're going to have problems along the way, but we've got a commitment to taking a step back, assessing and recreating as we need to make sure that we're doing this Herculean task in the very best way possible. So I'm really, really grateful. And I think that we have a good start.
Very good. Okay, well, Wendy, make sure you get to enjoy some of your vacation. I know Rick's probably off the golf course waiting for you. So,
Okay.
All right. Well, then I think that's a wrap. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.